while waiting for the stream to start.
Okay.
How about that?
Well, hopefully some people will start trickling in. If you guys could share the video around while I get it set up, that would be awesome. So today, this was kind of an impromptu stream. We were just chatting, and this is mainly to kind of show how the man that we covered in the last video got his screenwriting credentials, utilizing quotes from his own mouth.
Oh, God.
You sure it's his mouth?
Should be fun.
Yep. Well, honestly, like he does lie occasionally, and maybe we'll share some of the clips in which he blatantly like lies off his ass. But we're going to have some fun here. So let me share my screen. Audio. How he learned screenwriting. And can everybody hear me? Hear it okay?
Yep.
Yep.
Hearing you just fine.
I tried one before, but I got a couple of the screenwriting books and didn't find them very useful. Didn't think they were very well written. So what I found to be much more helpful for me was just to pick 10 movies that I loved and get the scripts for them. And scripts are easy to find on the internet. Some books don't have them, but they're out there. And spend that time instead of reading, spending 8 hours reading a how-to book, spending 8 hours reading, some wonderful scripts. Some of which were helpful in terms of plot mechanics, some of which were in terms of character revelations and things. And they span the range. I think Carnal Knowledge, just for the dialogue and for the characters, one of my favorite movies and one of the great scripts ever written, Jules Pfeiffer. Casablanca certainly is considered the classic, the gold standard, and Casablanca is just such a masterful script. I think every screenwriter should probably read Charlie Kaufman's adaptation. Certainly anyone who's about to adapt a book. Brian Cox is only in...
So let's kind of dissect that, shall we?
Sure. Let's get warmed up.
So he admits that he has never read a screenwriting book, and yet he was a screenwriter and writer on three major motion pictures of middling success.
I'm surprised they were even that successful if he has no experience whatsoever.
He has the position to do something great, and he's choosing to do something mediocre.
Mm-hmm. And somehow he managed to be the showrunner of one of the most successful TV series of all time.
Mm-hmm.
If not, it was a national phenomenon. It was bigger than Breaking Bad. And there's very little in terms of anything that can match its scale. So, and it's just, he admits from his own, and this has not changed. So, Nova Roma, how did he get the job in the first place? So, initially, there are a few reasons why that he says. One was that he bluffed his way through the interview with George R. R. Martin to get the book, the rights to adapt the book. There's also the fact that his dad is the former CEO of Goldman Sachs. So his dad is loaded. His dad's really rich. And he was also good friends with Richard Plepler, the director of the HBO at the time. He has been since replaced, thank goodness. But HBO, the reason why they allowed Game of Thrones to go through by Bennioff and Weiss's own admission was because they had a lot of good foreign pre-sales. So even though the pilot was a disaster that they needed to totally refilm, they were allowed to because the foreign pre-sales for the show were so good. And so HBO wanted to make back their investment.
Mm-hmm.
And their position throughout this whole show was basically, let's just ask for money and just ask forgiveness later. And ultimately, they were never chastised or punished, had any consequences. In reality, most of their budgetary constraints were lessened as the show went on, and it just made them go crazy, as we saw yesterday on the stream.
Mm-hmm.
Neph's already tired.
Yeah.
No, I'm just remembering that and going, oh my god, I do not know how they survived for the entire run of the show. I'm wondering how they didn't get fired.
Part of it is the boutique culture of HBO. HBO was originally run on the model of our shows win Emmys. And due to the fact that Game of Thrones became a blockbuster award winner show, they kept pooling money into it because they viewed that as success, as well as the fact that it brought in viewership every time it came on.
Mm-hmm.
That's one of the major reasons why they were able to keep going, as well as the fact that there was really no oversight or credentials examinations. And we'll eventually probably cover that kind of thing as well. But this is mainly this is how Bennioff learned screenwriting. There will be some commentary from Dragon Demands, but he has a lot of interesting things to say. At least I think so.
Mm-hmm.
It's like two scenes in the movie, and in many ways, I think is the heart of the movie. I think one of the great actors of our time, and someone's able to convey so much emotion without even speaking.
Mm-hmm.
I'm going to see him later on after Monty comes back and leaves, and he's just got such a great face. It's just that's a face that's lived a life, and he's able to really emote through it.
Mm-hmm.
This video is on how David Bennioff learned screenwriting. Now, I focus on David Bennioff because he is really the only one making major decisions. Everyone else is his lackey or his crony. Lindsay Ellis just made a big report on Game of Thrones last month over on her channel. It was very popular, over 1 million views. And in her report, she underscored that a massive problem, possibly the central problem, on the show was that Bennioff and Weiss were allowed to operate without any oversight from HBO or George R.R. Martin, and that there are no other writers. She singled this out. It's not just that it's not oversight from HBO, it's you don't have a full writer's room of other people to discuss these things with and go over them. That it is unusual for a show of this scale to have so few writers on it. There's one or two other guys. Brian Cogman was literally a personal assistant, and by his own words, started out as a coffee boy on the pilot, who sometimes did copy editing, that they promoted up to staff writer in season 1, even though that's shockingly unprofessional. Later, they did the same thing with assistant Dave Hill in season 6, and he actually has done decent work on the cartoons and stuff, but these are two men who owe their careers to David Bennioff because they don't have writing degrees. They would never have gotten into a show of this scale this fast. And okay, well, it's the writing duo of Bennioff and Weiss. Well, that is also a fable that they spun out. that everyone was someone Benioff hired, including Weiss. That originally it was just George R. R. Martin's agents talking to Benioff, who then they explain this in other interviews. Benioff invited Weiss onto Game of Thrones.
So let's discuss that. So this was very much a nepotism exercise.
Yes.
Because like even during like at the Austin Film Festival, which we will cover at some point, has a lot of very incriminating admissions. Even the admission that, oh, we just didn't hire any writers. We thought we could do it ourselves. We just hired our personal assistant. He's smart. Even when HBO was pressuring them to not even write bring in diversity hires, but bring on actual even TV writers that had credentials and screenwriting degrees and more experience than these two guys. Just white dudes, just any kind of writer.
Even a fanfic writer would have worked, probably.
Very likely. There are a lot of actually good fan theorists, and Game of Thrones actually had a such a good following that Boston University did a virtual season 8 before season 8 came out. It was released 6 months before the release of Game of Thrones season 8.
Let me guess, their virtual season 8 is better than the actual season 8.
Yes, it is infinitely better. It is.
I do not find that surprising at all.
Yeah.
Did the Ghost King win in that one?
No. There were a few things that still stayed the same. Like the burning of King's Landing happened, but it was for a logical reason, as opposed to Dany going nuts. It was more, oh, the dead are in King's Landing. There's a bunch of wildfire caches, or basically these Byzantine fire, and they say, okay, we need to destroy it with our dragons in order to keep these guys from totally overwhelming us.
Okay, that actually makes a certain amount of sense.
Yep.
So I would imagine the White from what I know about season 8, which is admittedly isn't a ton, the White Walkers completely fizzled out, and it's there was no point to them at all, which is really disappointing.
Pretty much, yeah. Did
Jon Snow get to finish his arc?
Not
or
in season 8? No.
In the virtual one.
In the virtual one, yes, actually. He is able to... He does finish off his enemy, the Night King, but there's a pretty hefty price to pay, which I think makes it more realistic that he has to pay that price and he has to leave Westeros forever. But it's for logical reasons as opposed to, oh, let's just send him to the wall because the eunuch dude says, get him out of here.
Oh, I wish the virtual season 8 was the actual season 8. It sounds so much better.
Yeah. This was written by a bunch of college students who are learning screenwriting, who put the work together to get a cast, to get a narrator, to record in a studio.
And it's sad that they did better than the actual writers. Oh my god.
Yeah, it is so ridiculous that this is the point where we are getting to, where they tried to make a guess of how it would go, and they made a better thing than the actual season, as opposed to trying to fix the elements of season 8.
Would you say it's because they were trying to go, oh crap, everybody knows how this is going to end. Let's do something completely different, regardless of whether or not it works.
Pretty much, yeah.
Why do people bother doing that? When your audience knows where you're going, that's a good thing. It means that you've communicated properly.
Yes, exactly.
So one thing that he actually did was there's a video that Dragonmans did about one of his admissions from Austin Film Fest, where he talks about David Bennioff and how to avoid a predictable ending, and how, or at least how David Bennioff wanted to avoid a predictable ending. It's mainly because the only book of literary theory he is internalized is, by his own admission, is The Anxiety of Influence. And it's a weird book.
Anxiety of Influence? I don't think I've ever heard of that one.
Okay, so to give a brief setup, we'll probably cover that in the future. But basically, the rough rundown is that Anxiety of Influence is basically talking about how the only works of fiction that are truly good and will last the test of time are those that are wholly original, and they're not reactionary at all. So even like by this author, I can't remember his name off the top of my head, but he's like, yeah, this is from like the 1950s, I think, and it's been disproven since. But it's basically that we are in a perpetual struggle, with an Oedipal struggle with the writers that came before us, if we're like reactionary to them, and we need to find like original stuff that has no like reaction stuff.
That makes absolutely no sense. No story is wholly original because every single story has already been done. The only way to make it original is to put a new spin on it.
Mm-hmm.
And that's what George Lucas did. That's what J.R.R. Tolkien did. That's what
George R.R. Martin did. That's what Joe Abercrombie and Robert Jordan and Brandon Sanderson have done.
And like, Mark Twain and every single writer since we started committing these stories to the page.
Yeah. Yeah, because in many respects we have all of this stuff and inspiration to draw from. Like, even like, I fully admit that some of my stuff is slightly derivative of Game of Thrones and Lord of the Rings, but that's because I like a lot of the concepts, like that are just the base concepts. Like, I like the idea of like making this dark ruler a sympathetic character who like is bent on revenge and ends up destroying a kingdom by virtue of their will alone, owned by assembling an army. I love that concept, and that's admittedly from the history of Lord of the Rings, but it's in such an obscure bit of the appendices that I'm never really going to see like a full exploration of something like that. So I have to write it myself in order to get it.
Yeah. And well, one of the original things that I'm writing is I saw what happened in 2016 and I went, oh my god, this looks like mass brainwashing has occurred, because it was like a switch was flipped and people who were rational the day before had gone completely insane.
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
And then because I'm a fan of swords and sorcery type of things, I decided that I was going to add a few elements from the Dragon Age games.
Oh, nice.
Yeah. So it was the reaction to the election and the resulting Trump derangement syndrome, and none of the politics itself that got into the story, because I can't politic to save my life, and politics, quite frankly, puts me to sleep. So, yeah.
That's fine. Yeah, that's totally fine. Yeah, I really, I like a lot of, like, I find honestly the history of A Song of Ice and Fire infinitely more interesting, because there's a lot of base concepts in there that like ideas for characters, ideas for like situations, ideas for just really, really fun and interesting stuff, like in terms of like dynastic disputes, rebellions, stuff like that, all drawn from actual history. That's just like, oh, this is amazing. I love this stuff.
Yeah.
And that's just something that I did, as well as mining from my own knowledge of history, like especially like the battles of Alexander the Great, a lot of medieval tactics, stuff like that. And
The Romans, the Greeks.
Yeah, the Greeks, the Romans. I probably should at least like do some cursory looks at the new model army that was created by Cromwell. But as of right now, most of my information is on like the Roman army and stuff like that.
Yeah.
But anyway, let's continue, shall we?
And just through years of watching this pair together in interviews and reports on whenever they've let slip how exactly a writing decision happened, it's all Bennioff. He's the one directing everything. He has personally monopolized all of the major decisions on the show. He needed Weiss as a prop. You see, Bennioff on his own can be accused of being an unskilled or untrained fool. If you can point and go, this was Bennioff's idea, he gets the blame for it. But when it's a decision by the writing team of Bennioff and Weiss, it becomes amorphous and esoteric, an abstraction.
Weiss became a fall guy.
We say it was by Bennioff and Weiss.
Or, well, let's keep
We're
going.
Talking about some discussion they had off screen that we didn't see. As if it's presuming that there was a discussion between these two men with measured decisions and rational arguments working out why they should do something, not literally one very impulsive man making decisions surrounded by cronies and then doing them. So Weiss is just an earlier version of Cogman, someone that Bennioff lifted up and invited on to be a writer because it sounds more impressive to be a writing duo. But just looking, I've explained this in other videos, looking at just how they react to him during interviews, when the few times they've said what decisions they make, it's always Bennioff taking the lead. So Weiss is just a rubber stamp. The other one or two writers, they're cronies. It's one man monopolizing everything. So to spell it out, I think Bennioff just sent Weiss and Cogman an email one day going, hey, I came up with an idea that Arya will kill the Night King, so we're doing that. Just end of discussion. There was no back and forth. He just hands down direct.
That was so stupid.
Yeah.
That was Jon Snow's story arc. Nobody should have stepped in to do it for him. And
it made literally no sense the way they did it.
Yeah.
I'm not stealing your kill.
He surrounded himself with a bunch of yes men. That's what he did.
Yeah. Like, and none of these guys like had the clout to say no, and we might take a look.
That's exactly why he hired them.
Yeah. And like by the end, it was just him and Weiss writing the worst 4 episodes of the show, 3 through 6. And they make 0 sense. And there's even evidence that they were working on the CGI 2 weeks before the finale. And they were making changes that late in the game. So your analogy, Yokai, of them waiting 6 minutes, that's partially true. It's like 6 days. It's like a week, possibly a week or 2.
It's waiting to the last minute. How did these guys get through school?
Through Daddy's money. I imagine through Dad's money, because he at least has like a master's in literature, but the problem is his writing is really, really bad. like even like his book writing. At the end of this, I'll like, as a taster for Bennioff Thinks Brown Women Are Hot, we will hear a dramatic reading of his amazing work.
I'm not sure if I'm looking forward to that anymore or not.
Oh, you are totally looking forward to it, because I think we are all going to be very, like, I've desensitized myself, but I imagine that most of the other people on this panel and in the chat are going to be like, wait, what? He's said this? How has this man not been Me Too'd to high hell by this point?
And hasn't it been proven that
Yeah.
nobody is safe from being Me Too'd? Hasn't that been
Yeah.
proven? So how
Yeah.
has it not happened?
It's really interesting. I think part of it is basically he is a showrunner and he's not that high. He's somewhat high profile, but he's married. But maybe that, I don't know why. Maybe it's just like he's not high profile for the Me Too movement to go after.
Wait, there are people who are too high profile?
Or maybe like, well, not like too low profile, I mean, sorry. Especially
I think you
since,
may have been right the first time. I think there are people too high profile.
yeah, really. Okay. Well, I mean, like, his dad is loaded to high heck. It is like his dad is really rich, and by this point he's really rich as well. But oh, he has a wife and kids, Dr. Crow.
So he bribed his way through school.
I imagine that he did, since his credentials do not speak highly of his grades.
No.
Yeah.
And if he wanted to be a writer, he should have been writing. And he
Mhm.
should have been going to class. Or, maybe not. I didn't go to class for that. But writing has been my hobby since I was a teen. So,
Yeah. I've loved writing for a long time. And I fully admit that, like, I was not good for like 2 years, and it took me like 2 years and a lot of editing to like get Lost Legion actually good. And then I got War of the Thousand Kings. I felt really proud of how that turned out, and then I was really glad with how King of Damnation ended things for that particular trilogy.
I know that when I was a teen, I sucked. And everything is cringy.
Yeah, like, there's so much. Yeah, I fully admit that, like, a lot of my stuff, like, when I was like 14, was very cringy. It was like very much the character was a self-insert Mary Sue type. It was like kind of that dashing. A lot of them were like the dashing James Bond type. And it was just because I was a lonely 14-year-old, but I eventually grew out of that.
Same here. You grow out of it because one day you realize when you're looking at what you're writing, you go, this is boring. Why would anybody else why am I writing this? I don't want to read this. Why would anyone else want to read this?
Mm-hmm. Oh, let's keep going, shall we?
Directives to them that they're not allowed to really question.
Mm-hmm.
So I think that's already pretty clearly established even before this and the clip I just posted. Bennioff is the one driving everything, and it's all due to his personal idiosyncrasies and his own personal issues and skill level of what goes into this show. So if it's all being run by this one guy with no oversight, the question obviously becomes, what does David Bennioff know about screenwriting? Well, a simple internet search will reveal that his college degrees were in literature, not screenwriting programs, and that he had no prior experience in television. He's admitted and joked on video, I lied to Martin about my experience in television. I actually don't know how to run, coordinate the different production units. He had no prior TV experience. And even just in terms of movie screenwriting, he had very limited experience. He really it was 2 years from 25th Hour until he was hired. And that was really because of Spike Lee and coasting along on that. He made a string of other flop movies that you've probably never heard of, and the two that kind of stand out are 2004's Troy, which had a mixed reaction at best, and later on, after he was hired, X-Men Origins Wolverine. That he is not a very widely praised with a long career movie maker, and even then, he isn't as experienced in television. But okay, we thought. I thought this. I am not calling anyone stupid. I got fooled by this. It's the old puff yourself up and act confident, and people think you know what you're talking about routine. I thought, okay, he's a screenwriter. He knows there is a task before him. Any rational person like you or I, like, if you go into work one day and they're using a software program that you don't know yet, like they're using Apple and you only know Microsoft, you research an instruction
People
manual.
not see this coming with a resume like that.
No. So I guess we all just assumed that in the years between 25th Hour in 2002 and when Game of Thrones started, he must have done a lot of self-training in, okay, these are screenwriting manuals. I have to read through them to learn what to do.
Nope.
Not even in terms of, okay, we can delegate the production unit stuff to one of the HBO producer types, but in terms of, okay, well, he's first and foremost a writer. I assumed he had basic knowledge of screenwriting, or at least was trying to learn it after his career as a novelist. And not even just for Game of Thrones, but for his career in other movies. And it turns out he didn't. That he openly says he considers instruction manuals to be frustrating, so he takes it almost as a point of pride that he doesn't bother reading them. And yes, this...
So, yeah. I would say that is a very dangerous mentality to have. What would you guys say?
Yes, that is a very dangerous mentality to have. I understand how he would think they're frustrating because he has no one to ask if he's got questions. But that's what taking actual classes in college is for.
Or examining, or like even watching classes online. Like Brandon Sanderson's creative writing course is on YouTube. You can watch all of his semesters.
Or maybe reading an actual screenplay as an example while you're reading the manuals, so that you can.
Or taking a look behind the scenes for how they are doing stuff.
Yeah.
And that's kind of one of the issues with why they thought that Akira Kurosawa's Ran was a good model to base it off of, because they didn't fully realize, because they just didn't look carefully or whatever, that you can't kill horses. This is not the 1980s.
One point this guy brought up, I wasn't sure if he quite meant it the way he meant it, but it was like something about if you're going to a job whether you use Apple and all you're familiar with is PC. If that's the case and he actually means like Apple operating systems, you probably don't take that job. They are completely different. You might be able to get away with using different versions of applications, but if it's something completely proprietary and you're programming for Apple and you've never programmed for Apple before, you are in the wrong job. I can speak to this fairly professionally. I don't know if that's what he thought he meant, but if that is actually the case and this guy was completely that far out of his league, that's ridiculous. It's like being a translator for two languages. You don't speak either.
Oh, yeah. That's a very, very good analogy, actually.
Yeah, like when I was like learning how to write when I was a teenager, I would like research like how writers like came to their thought process. I would read a bunch of books. I would kind of do research into like Joseph Campbell's The Hero's Journey. I would take a look at like Brandon Sanderson's creative writing class, YouTubers who seem to know about writing, stuff like that. Just simple stuff. And I have found that my writing has greatly increased. Some of the people I used to watch when I was a teenager have since lost my respect, but
that's not surprising.
Yeah.
Drunkle's got some good points.
Yeah.
There's nothing wrong with wanting no advice, wanting to learn things on your own, but please don't experiment and practice with a major television show which everybody looks up to.
I have a response for that, actually. So I've been silent for a minute because I've been thinking on this. It seems to me like when Drake said that it's almost as if he's trying to be a messenger for people that speak two languages and he knows neither of them. He sounds like the type of person that he sounds like someone who's prone to focusing on what's right in front of them for better or for worse. And here's what I mean by that. So I know that Neph Champion was talking about the 2016 election a moment ago, and that's actually equally relevant to what I'm about to say about writing.
Okay.
I think that when you analyze people in this kind of position in life, you'll find that it's a perfect analogy. Well, actually, the better word would just be a perfect example
or encapsulate
the way people are incredibly dependent on agenda-driven services. And I don't just mean that politically. What I mean by agenda-driven services, I'm going to actually explain that further in a moment. But what it means to be extremely dependent on agenda-driven services, like your phone constantly having ads on it, like when you're watching a YouTuber that you like and the YouTuber is vocal about certain points, again, not just politically, but like when someone is critiquing something, you'll become more conscientious about what that specific person is conscientious about. And I think that it's because of our reward systems. When you buy something like a video game or purchase essentially the rights to get a college degree, it's going to be in your best interest to agree with the people that surround you. Now, why does this matter? Well, I think that if your coworkers value democratic politics, for example, you're going to be likely to follow in their footsteps. In the same way that if you're surrounded by writers that value originality over competence, you're probably going to make that same mistake. And I think that the more you progress upward, the more likely you're going to be to consider the priorities of your peers to be virtuous. You're going to think they're on the right track, so you must be on the right track by agreeing with them. And again, I think that's because of your reward systems. So by the time you're someone as famous as this individual, you're going to be extremely you're going to be an extreme advocate of any materials that helped you get to where you are and any materials associated with getting where you are. If you read a book written by a coworker, for example, or a coworker that, like a manager, someone in a position even higher than you, recommends a book to you because you're both working in your screenplay writing industry, right?
Yeah.
You're going to be very likely to not only read that book, but agree with just about every word it says. Mm-hmm. Because the more you agree with that book, the more your reward systems are going to tell you, hey, you can be like the person that wrote this book. You can be like the person that handed you this book. I don't think it's a specific I don't think it's that he had the intention of becoming someone that values originality over competence. I think it's just a consequence of his upbringing. I think it's a consequence of the industry he pushed himself into. He had an offer to write a screenplay, even though he wasn't in that field, and he took it. Why? Because he seems to have a personality that's extremely vulnerable to things that are right in front of him. And sometimes it can be in your best interest to be like that when you're surrounded by nothing but opportunity, especially when all those opportunities are intertwined. Like if you work in Hollywood, you're going to love everyone you see. You're going to love everything you see. Why? Because not only is it going to make you famous, but you're going to be constantly surrounded by people that are encouraging you to follow them to stardom. So even if you're not conscious of it, you're going to become extremely you're going to become an extreme advocate for everything that people around you support. And I think that's why we have these people that work at Hollywood that all believe in the same silly things that are extremely out of touch, because that's their little community. Just like a number of psychologists historically have said, unfortunately, not many names come to mind, but a lot of psychologists have written in their textbooks and have spoken with one another even about how we're all extremely vulnerable to our peers, to our coworkers, even more so than our parents. The people that are joined with us at the hip affect us far more than the people responsible for us. So by the time we become responsible for ourselves, we're thinking just like the people that were walking alongside us the whole time. And I think that it's a very broad explanation for this specific example. So that's my input on that.
I like it.
That sounds about right. Yeah.
Yep.
Maybe this is just me, but my thoughts on that slightly different. Basically, it doesn't really matter where you're at. What matters is either your plurality of experiences or your humility in those experiences, and how much you're willing to just accept the Dunning-Kruger that there are things that you don't understand. And if you go in with that mindset, you'll be more likely to pick up more stuff and absorb it a lot easier. If I could make a quick little couple-minute divergence, I've been building Gunpla for about a year and some now, and I still, to this day, even though not many people do, I still read the instruction manual page by page by page by page. I don't think that I got the gist of where this is going. So I have the pages always open, even when I built like very similar kits, Goofs, Zaku's, all generally the same sort of chassis, but I still keep the instruction manuals open because I do not want to be caught for a loop by something that could go pear-shaped very quickly, like getting a leg part in backwards and needing to take it out. Once you hit those roadblocks of, oh crap, I screwed up, I used the left shoulder part and the right shoulder part, now I have to take all this apart and risk breaking the model. You really have to get kicked in the teeth in order to get that humility in you. And these people don't get kicked in the teeth at points where it's safe for them to get kicked in the teeth in school when they're learning. So that's sort of my take on this. This, like, they didn't get beat up when they should have been.
Probably not. Like, I know that David Bennioff himself was ostracized as a kid. Like, he just, like, his parents didn't pay any attention to him. They just didn't. Like, they didn't even like notice that he had a lateral lisp, and he didn't even know until he was 35 by his own admission. And he just didn't get any brace. He didn't get braces when he was a kid. I think his parents might have fought about how who was going to pay for him to get braces, and he ultimately, like, still to this day has crooked teeth, because he was very neglected as a child. And yeah. Well, let's thank you all for those. That was great. Let's keep going. This is going to be great.
Commentaries from 2003, though I point out it was only 2 years later that he was hired. How much difference could there have been? But moreover, more importantly, he doesn't just say that, well, I'm new to this, I haven't read instruction books yet. He adamantly, proudly says he has no intention of ever reading them. That it is a waste of time to him, and instead explaining his theory on how he can just read through scripts of movies he likes with reading them cold with no outside information, and from that intuit core writing principles from them, even though they're not spelled out in the text with corrections of, well, here you should be saying this in dialogue because the audience can't see your footnotes, which are things instruction manuals say, that the audience can see things, hear dialogue, hear sounds, that's it. No, these weren't spelled out in the scripts for his favorite movies, but he has this concept, excuse, well, I can watch things, I can read things, and intuit principles from them.
We went into it with no
Not
experience
really.
with television whatsoever,
And
made a tremendous number of mistakes for the first year. I mean, still make mistakes every year, but I think, but you know, hopefully learning.
You probably make the same mistakes because you don't know what you're doing.
Yes, they do.
I actually have another point.
Yeah,
I think this one. I think you guys will find this point amusing, but it just occurred to me a second ago that so rather than reading new things, obviously it looks like this guy, he prefers to stick to old stuff that he likes. Now, you know, this is basic human psychology to value familiarity. Elon Musk talks about this. If you read something, you're going to be likely to keep that with you. And then if you read a book that's objectively superior, you'll actually be likely to disagree with that book's points in favor of the one that you're familiar with, just because you read it first. And here's the thing. It seems, in my opinion, that this guy's aspirations not only transcend far beyond his discipline, but they actually don't align at all.
Yeah, they don't.
He says that he aspires to create something that is entirely original, but he's attempting to do so by replicating old films that inspire him. That doesn't line up.
And like I said, there is nothing that's original, only new spin.
Mm-hmm.
So...
Like Game of Thrones did not invent the medieval political drama thriller. There are multiple book series that have done that. Because there's a book series called The Millennium, which is very similar to Game of Thrones and was published before it came out. That has a lot of similar beats to it.
And I think that's a perfect... Sorry to interrupt you.
Oh, go for it.
I think that's a perfect example of how he only seems to consider things that are right in front of him. He hasn't read a medieval political drama before, from what I understand, so he doesn't think he's replicating anyone by doing it himself.
Mm-hmm.
So it's another example of him only working with stuff that he's familiar with and not willing to open himself to new ideas. And if you have a very narrow view of the world, the chances that you're going to accidentally copy somebody, but it's going to be worse than copying someone because it's in a very low resolution way because you haven't weighed all the options, then it's very unlikely that you're going to succeed.
Mm-hmm.
Yes. It's a miracle that Game of Thrones succeeded. At least in my
well, when I say succeed, I'm not referring to success in terms of like broadened success in front of other people. I'm talking about his internal goal of aspiring to create something original, but utilizing disciplines of old habits. It's unlikely that he's going to succeed at that goal if it's even possible.
There's a lot of cognitive dissonance going on there.
Yeah.
Right?
Yeah.
Like, does it occur to anybody else that he's trying to be original while also adapting a book? By definition, you can't do that.
Yeah. Yeah, I think part of the thing was he's scared of being forgotten is one of the things that you see in the show frequently, that a lot of people say that death is forgetting. And that's a really interesting view into this man's psychology, because that's not in the books.
Death is forgetting.
Yeah. There are frequent mentions of like the worst fate that anybody can imagine is having being forgotten. And it seems as though David Bennioff is scared crapless of that fate, of fading into obscurity and not being remembered.
That sounds legit, actually. But that's not how forgetting works.
Mm-hmm. And I think in many respects, he wants to be a great writer and wants to be remembered, but unfortunately, due to his own actions at like the Austin Film Festival and with Game of Thrones, the problem is he's going to be remembered as a pariah at best. Like, even the industry itself hates him. That's a unique feat where, like, it's not really like that big a deal if like the fans don't like you, but when the industry itself and the mainstream media turn on you pretty much universally, with only like a few holdouts on YouTube and Watchers on the Wall, which was like very much admits to being like bought and paid for show apologists.
I think that what you're referring to really boils down to the creator's ability to recover.
Mm-hmm.
When you look at someone like Vic Mignogna, for example, the industry clearly turned on him, but the fans didn't. And that's proving quite fruitful for him. Mm-hmm. But then when you look at someone, say, anybody that works at Disney, they aren't suffering nearly as much as they probably should. And the reason why is because of the industry's support for them.
As well as some like half of the fan base is down with their stuff.
Yeah, and then that comes down to, some cognitive dissonance of their own and influence. But the thing about this is now we're looking at someone that is infamous both in the industry and by fans alike.
Yeah.
And so due to notoriety, we all know about the show. Mm-hmm. But because of decisions that he made narratively, and that being a consequence of poor time management as well as other factors, it's likely that he's becoming exactly what he probably wanted to avoid.
Mm-hmm. And a big part is basically like the people, like it's unusual that even like other people in the industry, like Seth Rogen, actively took pot shots at the show at Comic-Con right after the Game of Thrones panel. That's very unusual. Like, usually,
we also have to consider. Actually, go ahead.
Yeah, no, go for it.
Well, I was going to say we also got to consider denial, because I think he's attending all these interviews.
He's only done 3 interviews during the course of the later show.
Okay, I wasn't aware.
They went on full media. They actively avoid interviews, and mainly they don't show up to anything without cast members. There are very rare times when the interviewer is just the interview. It's them and the interviewer, or them in a live crowd. That's why Austin Film Festival was such a bombshell, was because it was them spraying their mouth everywhere.
So this is hitting him at a more personal level than I was aware of then. Because now we're talking the modification of physical movement and attendance to social events as a consequence of his actions, pretty much.
Yeah.
And that's when, here's the thing. That might, now I don't know here, that might be the best thing that ever happened to him.
Yeah,
Because
like,
maybe now
good-
he'll start to consider his time management skills and the consequence of his narrative
well,
goals. And by narrative goals, I'm talking about trying to be unique without reading previous materials and then basing it on previous materials that he probably looked at before he even aspired to become a writer. Stuff that he watched as a kid, for example. He's willing to consider that. But now that he's in that position, it's like, oh, well, now I don't want to open myself up to new stuff. I just want to go.
Mhm.
And that's dangerous. And because of the consequence of that danger, maybe he'll change. Now, I don't know. Quite frankly, I doubt it, only because of most people in this kind of position. They tend to not improve in a way that's visible anyway. But maybe I'm wrong. This could be his saving grace.
A big
He-
part, yeah.
He
He just
did
go for it.
achieve his goal. He's gonna be remembered. He's not gonna be forgotten, but he's not gonna be remembered the way he wants to be remembered.
Yeah,
And that's a problem for him.
Yeah, he's likely going to be remembered as the dude who torpedoed the long-running franchise potential of this particular IP.
But here's the thing. That's the thing. This particular IP. If he's not attending interviews, he seems to be aware of it. And if he's aware of it, he might change.
The main thing that he kind of admits to is, like, even when he appears at, like, public events, he will deliberately fade into the background and allow the actors to answer the question for him.
Mm-hmm.
Even when he should be the one answering the questions.
Pretty much, yeah. Like at the Emmys and at Comic-Con, most of the time, like even when they'll be there, the actors will just take the question for him because he knows if he stays silent. Like he admits to this in the Austin Film Fest that I just stay silent and let somebody else answer.
Now, was he always like that, even during season 1? I'm sure there were interviews during season 1.
I imagine that there were, but ever since but that was kind of when they were kind of giving a lot of effort. After season 4, when they were writing season 5, after the success of the Red Wedding basically made them untouchable, they stopped giving interviews. There's only 2 that I am aware of, and those are this particular documentary thing, as well as the writing interview in Idaho. And then once the show finished, there was his interview regarding in Japan, I believe, and then the Austin Film Fest. And 2 days after the Austin Film Fest, Disney said, "Get out."
And he didn't show up most of the time during filming, right?
During night shoots, no. They were often in, as opposed to they were in places like Dubrovnik, really nice tropical areas, as opposed to cold night shoots in Northern Ireland, especially at the end.
Maybe, and this is just, I'm just guessing here. This is just skepticism, but I'm wondering if another factor we can consider is that he's very uncomfortable in social situations.
He actually is fairly comfortable. He's actually very glib. Like a lot of the thing around Austin Film Fest was actually not just his comments, but the fact that there was a live tweeter summarizing his word salad, because that's one thing that Bennioff likes doing. It's kind of that politician speak. He avoids giving a bad soundbite deliberately, and it was the fact that live tweeter basically summarized what he was saying in a live tweet format, and then that live tweet thread went viral, and then mainstream news got their hands on the audio track that was put on SoundCloud before it was edited by about 40 minutes by Austin Film Fest and reported on it. And that validated all of what the live tweeter was saying. And so they were like, yeah, this actually happened. The live
So he
tweeter
just avoids unpleasant situations.
pretty much, yeah. Like, for some reason, he avoided the Comic-Con immediately after Game of Thrones ended, but he went to Austin Film Fest, which arguably was a more dangerous place for him because he didn't go with any of the cast members. He just went with his sidekick.
That's
Weiss.
funny you say that. I was just about to ask if he went with anyone.
He just went with Benioff and Weiss because they're a writing team. They went together to that, but there were no cast members, and there was a live audience doing Q&A.
Oh, that was
Someone, you know what I think? I think someone told him last minute to go.
Might have been, but they chickened out of Comic-Con for some reason, where the rest of their cast was, and then right after the cast left of Game of Thrones left, and the cast of Preacher, including Seth Rogen, came on. Seth Rogen just ruthlessly took pot shots at them. We can watch that as like a palate cleanser because I think that will be very amusing because it's just like it's very. How many other like people do you know of in the industry who are willing to take pot shots at their fellow writers and people in the industry?
Not enough.
Not enough. Not nearly enough.
Yeah, this is a very rare example of just a person in the industry who is a show creator. The only thing that would be more damaging is if Vince Gilligan, the guy who made Breaking Bad and Better Call Saul, took a pot shot at them. But Seth Rogen, Seth Rogen publicly at Comic-Con mocking them, and like the people in the audience going up and asking him Game of Thrones related questions was.
It's just hilarious.
Yeah.
Hilarious. Interesting because they reveal some interesting things.
Kind of knowing how we wanted to write it, but not knowing anything about the casting process, the editing process, working with visual effects, working with production designer, all that stuff that you need to know. And it's been a steep learning curve.
They would get behind a project and they would give it a solid commitment.
We'd never produced anything for television before. We never produced anything for film or internet or anything. We'd written before, but we never produced. So when we went to George, it was probably like that bluff where you mistakenly think you have a straight and you actually don't. But we were so confident that I think we convinced George that, well, these guys seem like they really know what they're doing.
I said, I want it done. I want a faithful adaptation of the books. And they said, that's what we want to do.
In parallel to this,
Yeah.
That's damning.
Has Martin said anything since the end of Game of Thrones about any of this stuff? Is he sort of just on board giving thumbs up, praying to God nobody looks in his direction?
So he has subtly thrown shade at the show. So at one point he was asked, "What do you think of Game of Thrones so far?" And he said, "I don't have time for TV." And then like 2 or 3 days later, he tweeted, "Wasn't the ending of Last Kingdom amazing?"
The ending. So he has time to watch Last Kingdom, but not his own show.
Uh-huh.
The question is, why did we do this?
Yeah. Like
The Mark Hamill School being passive aggressive against idiot writers.
Yep.
Well, okay, Last Kingdom is a show is a medieval drama show based on a series of books by Bernard Cornwell. And I would say that The Last Kingdom is fantastic. It is excellently written. And season 4 was the best season so far. And I'm just glad that Netflix picked it up after season 2 and has kept going with it.
So it's what Game of Thrones should have been.
Yeah, there's no real like magic in it. There's superstition and a few other little things in it. But they actually did something really good in that they were able to streamline and adapt 2 books per season, and the plot is still coherent.
With how many episodes per season?
8. 8 for seasons 1 and 2, and 10 for seasons 3 and 4.
So they still managed, with only 8 seasons, to compile books 1 and 2 and 3 and 4 coherently. Wow. That takes a lot of talent to do that.
Well, it's actually like 8 book. Yeah, it's like all of the books, like they've covered 8 books worth of material in 4 seasons, but it's still really coherent. They've managed to, basically what they do is they'll have a mid-season climax, and then that'll shift to, and then they'll have a big climax even bigger climax at the very end.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah.
And the thing with Wheel of Time that is very different than this is that Wheel of Time actually has showrunners, and there's actual news reports coming out. Like Rafe Judkins has done shows before, and like even the author, like Bernard Cornwell, loved the series so much and was like, "This is so great! I am renaming my series The Last Kingdom as opposed to the Saxon Chronicles."
Yeah.
And it's really clear that these people love the books, and like they just absolutely love the material, and so they will translate it. There are some changes, but I honestly think that the changes are for the better and they make sense.
Now, if only Star Wars and Marvel and DC would do that.
Yeah. Agreed. But yeah, like as you can see from those clips, he admits we never did anything before. We just bluffed our way through the interview. Like that's not a good soundbite, dude.
No, it's not. Not at all.
Yeah, where you admit I was qualified, and now I'm on the show because I bluffed my way through. Yeah, Dr. Crow, it's amazing that like it's on Netflix and it's as good as it is. Like, and it's like really well funded. Like it looks really good. It looks GOT good in terms of like how good the production is and how like authentically medieval it looks.
And I'm betting that they have someone on board who's an expert at tactics who can tell them if, oh, this maneuver will only work if you use cavalry or not.
They also, one of the things that they do is in the very first episode, they have a Danish Viking invasion force form a perfect shield wall in the first episode, and then they pull a double envelopment where another set comes in from behind and forms a shield wall and basically creates a kill zone in between the 2 shield walls.
A lot of the Roman and Greeks?
That
sounds amazing.
Well, it's basically like more like round shields overlapping together and creating.
That's the Greeks.
Yep. Yeah, true. Not quite like the Greeks. Like the Greeks would like push together. What it's kind of more like Roman turtle, if kind of like it's just forward facing. and the people behind it are pushing forward, and like there's like a bunch of people holding their shields above their heads. Most of the Greek formations I'm aware of like is basically just like putting a spear out and pushing.
So the Romans with Greek with Greek shields, basically, because I've seen that in the Asterix cartoons. I've seen that kind of formation.
That's accurate. And we see the slow evolution of technology through the first season, where a Viking-trained young man named Uhtred comes over to the Saxons and begins training them how to fight like Danes. And teaches them how to form a shield wall and the efficacy of said shield wall. And that's used throughout the series. And the shield wall is implemented throughout the series by the Saxons. Well, again,
it's like people learn tactics really quickly, because it's like everybody remembers Hannibal, Battle of Cannae, and the famous double envelopment, and how it was so revolutionary at the time. What people don't remember is that Hannibal himself ate that maneuver later on in battle.
Yeah.
Let's continue, shall we?
Yeah, let's continue.
What happened before this that I read. 2 years ago, I made a video on the behind-the-scenes production failures on Season 6's The Battle of the Bastards. Failures that were entirely the result of willful ignorance by the showrunners. Bennioff and Weiss ignored the direct warnings of their production staff. It's not, well, how are we supposed to know that? Because everyone was yelling at you that they were running overtime and that your schedule was absurd. This didn't happen in vacuum. And so my video on the Battle of the Bastards behind the scenes, it's one of my more popular videos. That's something like 200,000 views as of now. So I hope a lot of you watching this have probably seen it already. To give you context, and please mention in the comments if you have, just the parallel between this clip and what he said in Battle of the Bastards. But if you haven't, check it out in full. I'm going to link to it. In that video, I talked about how director Miguel Sapochnik gave a really eye-opening interview after the episode aired, explaining how Bennioff and Weiss just refused to listen to anything, and their original version of that episode was an unfilmable mess, which actually looked, from his description, it was a lot like things such as the White Hunt in Season 7 or the battles we saw in Season 8, that I think they didn't surprise me when these things happened, that they apparently got more leeway and managed to force through their views on a battle is just focusing on one character as they get man-piled by a bunch of whites.
No, like, that's not how a battle works.
Battle of the Bastards would be like.
That's not how a battle works at all.
That's how the Royal Rumble works.
Better. You have to know where everyone is. You have to know where everyone is. You have to know where your cavalry is. You have to know where your archers are, or gunmen, or whatever. And you have to know where your infantry are.
Yeah.
You have to know. Otherwise, you don't have a battle. You just have a mass of bodies.
Yeah. So, like, compare this to, say, the Battle of Helm's Deep, where you see clear tactics. You see archers on the walls and archers behind the walls that are shooting in a swarm. Where, as well as archers high up. And then you bring in the ladders, the sappers with the explosives, and the ballistas that are designed to bring up these super ladders filled with guys onto the enemy walls, as well as a battering ram and a shield wall. Multiple interesting tactics are utilized within that battle that weren't necessarily just in the books. And because of the ability that they had to okay, we know these things work, and we're going to do some historical research. So we're going to make this battle as realistic as possible. there's slightly less tactics in the Battle of Eleanor Fields. In terms of when the Rohirrim come, it's basically a cavalry smash into infantry, but they are utilizing the sun rising behind them to blind their adversary, or at least make it so that they can't see as well.
Yeah.
And the fact that it's a large 6,000-man cavalry charge that then gets trumped by a bunch of Oliphants, the giant elephants. And then they have
I would
to
have called bullshit had you said infantry. I'd have called bullshit. if you'd said infantry instead of elephants, I'd have said no, there's no way that would work.
Yeah.
But elephants, yes, elephants trump horses.
Yeah, because horses...
Simply because they're bigger.
Yeah, and also because horses don't like the smell of elephants.
Huh, that makes a lot of sense, actually.
Yeah, like that's why horses are scared of certain animals, especially like wolves and other things. They're scared of the smell. And because you need to train a horse around an elephant in order to get yourself get the animal accustomed to this thing.
Mm-hmm.
And that's one of the reasons why elephants were used primarily against cavalry. In Lord of the Rings, these elephants are huge, and the horses do charge at them, but the horses get smashed by the giant tusks of these like 3-story tall elephants. And they have to like disable their legs, kill their drivers, stuff like that, in order to disable these creatures.
Yeah.
But yeah, that's definitely not how a battle works. And once I get a better computer, I'll be demonstrating some interesting tactic stuff, I hope. But let's continue, shall we?
Just a 10-minute one-shot of Jon Snow running around and fighting and getting tackled with no strategy, no pacing, no different turns in the battle, the way you would do that. And based on those descriptions, which we had years ago, it was no surprise when like the Long Night episode of season 8 was like that. It looks like the description we got for the original unaired version of Battle of the Bastards. There's a lot of other issues in it, which I could go on longer. The whole video I made is a 2-hour documentary. Please check out the full thing. It's just melee piles focused on showing off the actors mugging faces at the camera with no dramatic pacing, or even the battles don't make common sense.
Yeah.
But for our purposes here, a big part of that video is
yeah.
There's a reason you use horses, or there's a reason you use animals for things like pincer movement. It's because they move faster than we do. That is a simple biological fact. They are faster.
And also it's amazing. Yeah, it's also amazing that they didn't just notice and just ran at them. Like, and because that's a big mass, they just kind of stood there like idiots. Dr. Crow, to answer your question, why was he on the front lines? Bad writing. There is no reason other than bad writing. He got lured out by his little brother being like sent forward, like let run out while he gets an arrow shot at him. And then he just dies after Ramsay misses 3 shots.
So, do you mind really quick explaining for those who haven't seen it what is basically going on in the Battle of the Bastards? Is basically, I can intuit just from its name, it's Jon Snow versus some other guy, and so it's basically kill the other commander. Is that the win condition, for want of a better word?
Nope.
It should have been.
Basically, how it works is Ramsay Snow is sending his men into the melee while he stays behind. And Jon Snow is lured forward because his little brother is sent running forward and gets killed. and then who was absent for 2 seasons.
Yes, so
And
he's
just came in
basically
season
nobody.
3. Yeah, he basically appears in two episodes of season 6, and then just gets arbitrarily killed in the second episode he appears in season 6.
So the brother gets killed off, and then John wanders out into the open. He's dead.
Well, basically what happens is he charges forward because the enemy archers start firing at him, and he has to move forward in order to get out of their way. He moves forward in order to get out of the archer's way, as opposed to turning and going back to his lines, as probably would have been smarter.
Did he not have a support retinue of any kind?
Nope.
No.
He just rushed forward.
I'm thinking way too much into this.
Yeah, he just rushed forward on his own, trying to grab his little brother, only to have his little brother get shot just before he gets to him.
Suppose it would be foolish to ask if he had any sort of suppressive firepower on that battlefield whatsoever.
His Ramsay Snow basically has suppressive fire throughout most of the battle, where he just shoots his own men with impunity, where he just shoots arrows into the melee crush, while after the cavalry charges into each other.
Every question I ask about this just gets stupider and stupider.
Yeah. Whereas the archers on Jon Snow's side are not shooting. Because they say, stop, we'll just kill our own men. And then when they realize, oh, we're basically useless, let's charge Arch into the battle. When they could have waited, and when the enemy came in, they could have been there and started shooting. How Ramsay knew that they were coming in is beyond me.
Remembering that really snarky line from Final Fantasy XIII, real heroes don't need plans.
Yeah. Yep. We'll take a look at The Long Night as well. The tactics are even worse.
Yeah, to be fair, I've seen plenty of Long Night videos, so I will largely regurgitate, but...
Yeah, a lot of it is kind of simple, but I think like the debate, I think like the debate with Shadiversity and Remarkable Republican is absolutely hilarious.
Yeah, I think I've seen Shad's video on it where he basically just killed everything about that battle.
This is a specific segment of EFAP where he debates Remarkable Republic on whether or not it will be good. On whether or not it was good. The Battle of the Long Night was good or not. Because Remarkable Republican claims that it was good. Crickets.
I'm not even going to ask how, because I just know it's going to get dumber. Every time I ask a question, I get stupider stuff.
What can I say except you're welcome? Alrighty, let's keep going, shall we?
I explained how Sapochnik said for weeks ahead of time, Bennioff and Weiss were telling him that they were heavily researching cavalry charges in Akira Kurosawa's classic movie, Ran. That's Japanese for chaos. It's an adaptation of King Lear. It's a classic of international cinema. So when they kept going for weeks to him, we're heavily researching Kurosawa. We're heavily researching Kurosawa. And they were really proud of it, how much work they were doing into research. So when Sapochnik finally got their first draft script to see what exactly they wanted to do, it was this baffling, surreal moment that it looked absolutely nothing like a Kurosawa movie. And not just in terms of cinematography, which it didn't. The cinematography was nothing like that. I have a whole other video on that. But, Kurosawa uses wide shots and camera motion, and you want the camera to stay still in a close-up on Kit Harington. These aren't the same cinematography.
So again, we kind of see Benioff's own goals negating themselves. It's utterly ridiculous. We see like all you wanted was a horse charge. That's not Akira Kurosawa.
But apart from that, it didn't look like it. There's all these other issues with it. That you didn't research this. You know, the most pertinent was, you know, practical considerations about physically filming the damn thing. Just how would you produce and film these scenes? It's not even just all artistically. It's, you know, you don't know how to. This is physically unfilmable. As Sapochnik pointed out, you can see horses actually getting maimed on screen in Kurosawa's film. You could get away with that kind of thing back then. A horse running at full gallop and then falling on screen, there without CGI, this is before CGI, there is no way that animal didn't get hurt. And a lot has changed since then in the filming laws, so you never get away with that kind of thing today. Sapochnik said you can't do that kind of thing in this day and age. There's laws against that. And it wasn't just that they couldn't do this, which in and of itself is frustrating. It's that they had been insisting that they were doing a lot of research, and then they had all of these obvious problems that would have come up on even a casual search. Bizarre, obvious, blatant things you couldn't do with horses. And dude, you said you were researching this. And Sapochnik did his own basic research on filming and legal handling of live animals. And it turns out that the laws in the United Kingdom became so strict, you know, where they had to film in Northern Ireland, that you can't even show two horses touching on screen, much less crashing around, for fear that, well, if they touch while they're at full run, they might trip each other up and fall. So just the fear of, don't even let them get near enough to each other to touch, for fear of knocking them over, they break a leg and you have to put them down. The animal rights groups are all over that. And whether you like it or not, it's the law in the books and what they had to deal with. It's the reality of, okay, we have to film in a matter of months. I don't think they're going to change the law for us. This is what's here. And you didn't even look up what legal restrictions, basic legal restrictions, apply to this.
Yeah. That's a big problem. We covered most of this in the Battle of the Bastards video, but Drake the Duelist, what are your thoughts on like the asinine condition that this was?
Okay, I'm back.
Okay.
I would think you would have to have done some kind of research, because one does not simply film in another country. You would have to look at this stuff. You would have to pick out the places where it would be the cheapest, it would be the most legal, it would be the most fitting with your vision. You would have, if it were me, I would have drawn up like a checklist of places all over the world, and then thinned it down to what best fit my needs, and then pick from there. And in that process, you would at least know what you're getting into. For them to not even know what the laws on this sort of things are, do they think horses are like bicycles?
They must.
Apparently.
Also,
Probably.
tell that to J.K. Rowling. She didn't do any research at all when she was building the wizarding worlds that were outside of Britain. She was just going, fuck yeah, Brits.
I've been thinking of telling that to Ryan Johnson. I mean, of all the complaints about The Last Jedi, he doesn't even know the first thing about horse racing. Racehorses are some of the most pampered animals on the planet, and you do not ride one and then shock it with a cattle prod. That's how you get thrown.
Yeah, or kicked. Like,
heck, that's how the handlers with the prods get injured.
Yeah.
Not just the rider.
And he doesn't fully understand like stuff like let's put a droid. Let's put droids instead of child slaves, because droids don't disobey their programming.
And then
Now,
we
wouldn't it be
get
charming?
And then we get
Wouldn't,
Rogue One, which has a droid going, droid raids! Yeah! When,
That was Solo. That was Solo. That was Solo, not Rogue One.
right, sorry.
It was so low.
Yeah, it was very low. It was pretty bad.
I have not watched that, but oh my god, that is so bad.
Femputer or Whore 9000 are my favorite nicknames for that character.
It's like, if Lando Calrissian has sex with robots, is that robosexuality or masturbation?
It's certainly not pansexuality, because if he was pansexual, he'd be jumping everyone, not just the
pansexual does
droid.
not mean having sex with the frying pan.
I don't know about that. I think it falls under it.
We're thinking. Dear
Yeah, it
Lord.
can be that. It can be that. Here's the thing: wouldn't it be charming if creators like J.K. Rowling, they discovered these issues in their creations, they disclosed them freely in a director's commentary or writer's commentary or what have you, get a good laugh out of it, become more enlightened, and then make something new that doesn't make those same mistakes. And that's how you keep moving forward as a writer.
Yeah.
Well, the problem is she kind of is. She's spraying it on Twitter. Like, she's spraying her opinions on Twitter. Which scene?
I think it's a little bit different.
Which scene?
A little
Dr.
bit
Crow?
different.
Oh, which scene, Dr. Crow, are you referring to? I'm interested.
Is it the droid right scene in Solo? Oh, dear Lord. I don't want to watch any of the Star Wars that have come out of Disney, because that's not Star Wars. It's got all the set dressings for a space opera, but it's not Star Wars.
Femputer death scene. Yep. Let's keep going, shall we?
So the original draft script they gave him had 70 live horses making a mass cavalry charge into each other at full speed, into men, fighting happening around horses that had fallen over, who were live horses. And he just went back to Bennioff and Weiss, stunned, and went, guys, this is blatantly unfilmable. Like, legally, we can't do that. And on top of that, pragmatically, from a production standpoint, even if we did do some of the less violent stuff, do you have any idea how hard it is to train stunt horses? How long it physically takes to teach them stage falls? Or how spooked they get when they see two humans fighting with swords in front of them? Like, the script was filled with like close quarters combat around the horses. So he's just like, you have horses running into each other in this who are real horses. Did you research Kurosawa's Ran at all? Just for weeks you've been saying you were researching it. Because
no, what they did was
you would know
watch
all
it.
this stuff.
Yeah, they just watched it. It's so weird that they basically said, no, we just watched the movie over and over again. We didn't pay any mind to how he is achieving this, what the animal rights laws are. We have done zero research. And yet, here we are. And so they had to, like, Sapochnik had to fight with them and say, no, we can't do this. Are you insane? We cannot do this. And all of the the horse guys are saying, we can't do this. And they ultimately settled on cutting out enough stuff that 25 days were usable. But then they got rained out for the last 3 days.
And on top of that, they did everything in chronological order, which is, no, that's not what you do. You film the stuff that is most important first to get it out of the way, and then everything's gravy.
Yeah, because if you lose something important like the ending, you're going to have to scramble real hard to make something different.
Yep.
And that's the ultimate problem with this show, is that these two men acted without oversight of any kind and were allowed to make this level of mistake 6 seasons in.
You know what I want? I want to get my hands on that script so I can look at it and then see if I can figure out how many episodes that actually would be. I would love to get my hands on that script.
Yeah.
That must be a really bulky document.
I imagine it was. I know that there were a few script reports specifically for season. It might even be on. I think one of the issues that they only utilized the final script with the Emmy pool, and that's what they got their Emmys for, unfortunately. But there's also several. Dragon actually does a number of scene reports that include some weird stuff that they just put in the scripts for the table read. In they said what's west of Westeros? Don't ask Kit or Sophie. They both failed geography.
Oh, good lord.
That's
What's
in
west
the
of
script.
Westeros sounds like the setup for a bad joke.
Yeah. Well, yeah. And but that's not in the actual. The failed geography part is in the script notes.
The notes, not the actual script.
Yep.
What?
Or when Daenerys comes out of the appears for the first time and the wings come out from behind her back. The description of the scene says Her Satanic Majesty's request.
What? Oh, dear
How
Lord.
do they know what Satan is?
I don't know. These people.
Well, or weird stuff. Other weird stuff in the script. Oh, I think in the script for Battle of the Bastards, they say there's actually a scene direction for Emilia Clarke that says she gives them a look that says, "My reign of terror is just beginning, mother effers." And then thankfully she says,
You can't do that without dialogue. I mean, there must be someone who's good enough with facial expressions to be able to express that without saying anything. But
that's a complicated phrase to get across.
Yeah, that's a very complicated phrase to get across. You basically can't do it unless at least part of it is in dialogue.
And thankfully, she does say my reign has just begun a couple minutes later. But in the scene notes, it's not scripted.
Well, thank God she didn't listen to them.
Yeah, or when they said on the day, "Hey, will you change up this this dialogue so it's Valyrian, this alternative language on the day?"
Oh, dear Lord. At least with George Lucas, he went out of his way to use very obscure languages that still had native speakers to teach his actors to use as the alien languages.
Well, kind of the thing is, they have a linguist who created the entire Valyrian language. And they could have just emailed him. But they decided impulsively on the day, and Emilia Clarke thought it was a joke. They talk about it in the season 8, episode 6 commentary.
She thought it was a joke.
Yeah.
I do not blame her for thinking that at all.
Yeah, she says it was a I thought it was a joke, and you owe me a bottle of wine for that one. Like, no preparation. I was like on the day.
So so they asked her on the day. They didn't give her any time at all to learn the pronunciation of the words.
She had been doing it for several seasons before this point, but coming up with a new speech was very, very, like, they just reused a bunch of words. And it sounded somewhat different, but the problem is they could have just asked the linguist rather than just impulsively doing it on the day.
Yeah, they should have asked the linguist the week before.
Yeah.
But then again, this is their legendary time management non-skills speaking.
Yep. And I'll show you guys some of those little clips. I'll get the timestamps and we'll cover those in sequence because they're juicy. They're like super, super juicy.
I'm looking forward to that then.
Yep.
If you did even a casual background search. By research, I assumed you meant you read books about Kurosawa. He's a famous filmmaker. That you went through behind-the-scenes documentaries on Kurosawa. And Bennioff basically just went, well, we watched the movie a lot of times to see what things we liked in it, with no real thought to filming principles or reading materials about it that explained principles that were in it of you need this many things to film a horse in this way. And that led to scheduling problems because they thought it would take 3 times less to teach a horse a stage fall. And what did they even base that number on? They pulled it out of the air. And he was like, you said we had 2 weeks to film this. It would take 6 weeks. Did you even factor horse prep into this? Which is kind of obvious. Anyway, I made that video 2 years ago, and it was bizarre at the time that Bennioff's concept of doing research for this big action scene, research for cinematography principles, how to frame it, was just watching the movie cold with no outside information. So when I actually went back to research his DVD commentary on the 25th Hour, it turns out that was his attitude towards screenwriting itself. Exactly the same thing. If you're familiar with my earlier documentary on how his idea of research for Battle of the Bastards and horse prep and cinematography, please comment on this. It's the same thing. He did that with screenwriting. Bennioff doesn't learn. He doesn't do research. This is why the script for the season 8 finale looks like it's making a lot of the same mistakes that were in the original unaired pilot, which was unintelligible because he would put vital information in scene descriptions, which only the actors can see. That he doesn't try to improve himself because in his mind he's already perfect. He's an utter narcissist in a medical sense.
Mm-hmm. So let's kind of like go back to this. They had to reshoot the pilot, and part of the reason was they didn't mention that the twin brother of the queen is having an affair with her. They didn't know that it was the queen's twin brother. And that's an important plot point because that's the catalyst for the rest of the show. So they had to refilm little bits of scenes and insert a couple of scenes in order to make it so that it made more sense.
Oh, well, Yokai, do you really think he's gonna learn from this? Because this seems to be his entire attitude towards everything he does.
Yeah. We also notice this is the scene description of the episode 6 script of season 8. Like, does this look like a screenplay script?
No, this looks like an excerpt from a novel.
Yeah, that's how he writes. And so, like, you notice, like, we follow him Son of Saul style. Tight on his face. these performances, these faces are what we are what they were focusing on.
I get that knowing how to write in general helps if you're trying to learn to write a novel or write a screenplay.
But they're two very different disciplines that require
and two very different styles of writing.
Yeah, if you want information to be conveyed, you cannot do it in the screen direction, in the set directions.
No,
it has to do it in dialogue. You have to do it in dialogue.
Yeah,
or else that information. Oh, go for it. Sorry.
Yeah.
Well, this gets into faces again.
Yep.
And faces are not.
They wanted the actors to do the writing for them.
Pretty much, yeah. And the problem is they have a lot of dialogue in their thing that they could have conveyed, but they chose, no, let's just keep it in the subtext.
Again, there are people who cannot read the subtext or have trouble. And that's going to turn, at least some percentage of the audience off and not watch the rest of it if they don't understand what's going on.
Yeah,
Which
there's
is
also
why you can't just have subtext. You have to have dialogue.
Yeah, you can do certain things with just a face, but you need to intercut it with other things that are happening in the room. Like if somebody, say, is glancing, you can make the mental leap of if somebody looks at...
This isn't subtext.
Yeah.
It's not subtext because it doesn't translate to a book. You can't... You understand what I mean?
Yeah, I do.
Yeah. It's... one of the things about like cinematography is that you can take a person and intercut them with something else to show that that is where their attention is. But if you're just focused on the face, you don't know what is happening. I know there's a scene...
you can't focus on the face. Not all the time. You can focus on it for the moment before you switch to something else, which is what has their attention. Or say the setup is they're in the dining hall and suddenly someone off stage screams because it's supposed to be in a different part of wherever they are.
Yeah.
And so if you're just looking at a single person, you're not going to know what's going on, even with the scream in the background. Instead, if you are focusing on the entire hall and you notice that everyone looks up and in a certain direction, then you know something's going on off screen. But if you just see one person's face and you hear a scream, you have no idea what's going on.
Mm-hmm.
How did they even get anything filmed before someone caught that? That's a very good question, Blue. I have no idea.
Dragon actually has a series of videos on the failed pilot that we could take a look at some point. This is a gloriously amazing mess and a treasure trove.
I can't wait.
Okay, I'm going to give you one example of subtext, a low-resolution example, just to get my point across. This is an example of subtext. A character goes to some kind of agent of something, right? Like a private investigator, and they go in, and I'm saying in a medieval setting, they go in and they see weapons on the wall. Now they know that this character is experienced with warfare, so they're likely to be competent. Now here's what Game of Thrones thinks that subtext is. The character goes, knocks on the door, and the private investigator answers, and he asks, "Are you prepared for this task?" And then the character says nothing and just has a determined look on his face. That tells me nothing.
Yeah.
How do I know he's not in over his head?
It's like
you're not answering any questions.
Neph,
Yeah.
Neph, let Neph talk.
Hmm?
Yeah,
Sure.
yeah. Let
It's
Neph.
like I can't say his name right, but it's like the gun. If you see a gun on a mantelpiece, then it's gonna be used. And if there's a gun on the mantelpiece, then you know that at least one of the people who live in that house has to be experienced with guns.
Yeah, the
And it doesn't
Chekhov's
matter
gun.
who. Yeah,
Yeah, the
exactly.
Chekhov's gun principle. Yeah, where and like I think actually Easy Peasy actually brings this up in his Black Panther review. You can't just have a setup in Act 1 and then a payoff in Act 2. You have to remind the audience in the middle of it will pay off in Act 3. You have to have some kind of reminder in Act 2.
So you have to show the people the gun on the mantle in the first act. In the second act, you have to have someone grab it. And then in the third act, you can finally use it. But you have to remember, remind people that it's there.
Mm-hmm. Yep, exactly. So
he's already perfect.
It also goes by the law of conservation.
He's an utter narcissist in a medical sense of the term. And if you're going to react to that, you've seen how smug and simply bizarre his behavior was in the season 8 inside the episode videos, that the mask had fallen away. He was always like that, this utter narcissist. And
mm-hmm. Yep. One of the things that was the main fallout was the inside the episodes. So there is a moment in season 8, I will have to show it to you, but basically a group of ships come around a bend after sniper shotting a dragon 3 times with ballistas. And they have been mentioned in the episode 6 minutes earlier. And his justification is Danny, the owner of those 2 dragons, kind of forgot about the Iron Fleet.
Mm-hmm.
Okay, question from somebody who doesn't know the lore here. How smart are the dragons? Because I don't care if Danny forgot. Wouldn't the dragons have noticed something? Don't they have really sharp eyes?
Actually, yeah, that's a good question.
Yeah, so what happened was they're hiding behind a rock. They're hiding behind a rock, and somehow they no scope it, and then they suddenly are missing every shot when the dragon comes. Her dragon comes at them.
Yeah, I think I've seen the scene where it's 2 dragons flying. Danny's on one, and then the other just gets completely railed 2 times, and the other dragon just nothing wrong here.
Yep. The justification, even though the Iron Fleet, the people that kill the dragon, are mentioned earlier in the episode, Bennioff says verbatim, well, Danny kind of forgot about the Iron Fleet and Euron's forces, but they certainly haven't forgotten about her.
Do these people not know how animals work?
Why would she forget? Even if she did, the dragons would remind her. Because they would be acting off.
Yeah. That's the thing. Well, the dragons aren't intelligent. They don't talk. But it's basically just it is literally they're literally
Animals don't
going.
need to be able to talk to be able to tell you something.
Yeah, it just makes it even more stupid. It's literally out of nowhere, just the dragon, they're flying, and then the dragon just gets abruptly shot 3 times.
It's what is it, Drogon? Timmy fell down a well?
Pretty much, yeah.
Yeah.
And he just does not handle other people. All of these traits he has, and it's so creepy. That this guy was not vetted. Mm-hmm. We dodged a bullet. He could have been working on Star Wars. Thank
Oh my
Dragon didn't
God.
dodge a bullet.
I don't think we really dodged bullets in terms of that franchise.
Well,
Yeah, but it could
would've-
have been worse.
I think we took a
Yeah.
great many fatal hits there.
yeah, it has, but it would have been. He would have made something truly terrible.
Yeah, and we would have hated him even worse, probably, than we hate Ryan
Round.
Johnson. Ugh.
Yeah,
Ryan, kill me.
yeah. Good old Roundhead.
Yeah.
Yep. Let's keep going, shall we?
Yeah.
In mainstream news sites, not just like fan news sites or sci-fi news sites, just mainstream stuff, was openly describing and remarking on those inside the episodes as Benioff sounding like he was making victory laps, these self-congratulating victory laps, for episodes that were actually pretty sloppy. And being an utter narcissist, the point is, because he's a narcissist, he assumes he's automatically good at everything, in every field, without prior experience or even basic training. That he is spelled out in this clip you have just seen. He considers reading instruction manuals to be frustrating and annoying. They make him feel stupid, when no, I'm perfect. So he doesn't bother reading them. And this fits with that kind of person. He's a stereotypical rich brat who grew up to be a narcissistic man-child.
Man, baby.
And basically goes around mansplaining things to everyone on set. He goes to the horse wrangler. Well, no, it'll take
Take
3
it easy,
times
Crow.
less to do that with a horse. What are you basing that description on? He goes to carpenters and goes, well, you'll need this many resources to do that. No, we need twice that much. What are you even basing that statement on? And he'll go, no, this is what screenwriting really is.
Mhm.
When he has no training and, by his own admission, has never read a manual on it. So
Manuals are not
this
made to
is
make
all
people look
system
stupid.
Hold on, can you go back to the previous slide for a second?
Sure.
Manuals are not there to make people stupid. Manuals are
Oh,
there.
look at that facial expression. It's amazing.
Which one?
All of them.
But the point is, the point of manuals is to teach you something. If you're getting frustrated when you're reading a manual, then that means that you're not understanding something that you're reading. That doesn't mean that the book is talking down to you. That just means that you need to find someone to ask questions to.
Or have a dictionary in front of you.
That too. Maybe your vocabulary
Wouldn't a
isn't
dictionary
really
just
large
frustrate him?
Probably.
Maybe.
Probably.
It would not surprise me at all.
He just gets that face on the lower left when he looks at a dictionary.
Yep.
Yeah.
I imagine so. Well, let's keep going. We got 13 minutes left, and we're covering this at a good clip, I think.
Yeah.
Of behavior. It's not just one failure in isolation. It's a pattern. And it's not just the season 8 script. It's all of seasons 5 through 8. All the same basic failures of screenwriting, because this is a man who has never read a screenwriting manual. In the unaired pilot, as they later admitted, we kind of forgot to say in dialogue that Jamie and Cersei are brother and sister. It's just in the script notes multiple times, but never in dialogue. And this is a basic mistake that it says, be careful about putting too much in there. People who've seen their scripts go, why is there like a paragraph of script notes on characters' mental states? This is a basic mistake you're not supposed to do according to just elementary screenwriting. Well, he doesn't know that because he has absolutely no training and doesn't apply himself. He thinks, and has repeatedly said, he thinks actors can convey all that info with just a look with their faces. You just heard him saying that. emoting, faces. These are words he uses. So this is why, if you're wondering, in particularly the season 8 finale, characters just stand around mugging faces at the camera for 5 minutes on end.
So, to give context, the season 8 finale, the finale of the show, guess how much time out of the 3-hour-and-a-half long running time of the episode was silent?
Almost none.
57 minutes.
What?
What? What, 3 hours?
Of 57 minutes of an hour and a half long on final episode.
Oh my god. Oh my god.
Yeah. Mahler created a supercuts of all of the silent moments, and it came to 57 minutes out of an hour and a half long episode.
Holy no! That's not how you're supposed to do it! This is the finale! This is where you're supposed to have the most dialogue!
Mm-hmm. Yeah. And we'll cover the inside the episode for each of these, because these guys made some really gaff takes.
Oh god, that is going to be so much fun.
Yep.
Because this is like Peter Dinklage mentally reading off a 2-page script in his head of Tyrion's inner mental state.
Mm-hmm.
And this is a trend that got worse through the TV show's run, particularly when they started going off book in season 5. They didn't go off book because they ran out of material. They basically threw out books 4 and 5 because there came a point where they would throw out subplots, Sansa, Stannis, Dorne, because, well, they rewrote them to show off the actors, which they admit in the DVD commentary. But their concept of showing them off, because they don't know how screenwriting works, is showing off these wonderful faces emoting with no dialogue. Genuinely believe they can convey pages of information. He stated, I can convey pages worth of information through an actor's face.
No,
Yeah.
they can't.
And
No,
like,
you can't. You can't.
yeah.
If there's dialogue, there's a very good reason for that dialogue. That dialogue, especially when in a show like this, where you can't be in a character's head, the dialogue communicates what kind of headspace the characters are in.
Yeah. And the White Hunt is like 20 minutes of no dialogue.
Oh my goodness.
Yeah, it's insane how, like, it's just a silent action scene with barely any dialogue. Even when one of Dany's dragons gets killed, there's no dialogue. It's just facial emoting.
Bennioff was born in the wrong era of movies. If he wanted to be a movie creator, he should have been born when there was no sound at all in movies. And Blue's got a good point. He's so frustrating. Yes, good actors can convey a lot through their faces. On a subconscious level, really little facial tics convey a lot of abstract emotion, that is. But specific things? No.
Yeah, like an actually excellent example of this is Jake Gyllenhaal. Jake Gyllenhaal, when he's alone in Nightcrawler, his face will be completely immobile, but his eyes will move, and it's creepy because it's a deliberate choice. But then when he talks to somebody, he will like become very animated, but there's a fakeness to that animation that is very much related to the fact that he is playing a sociopath who is able to get under people's skin and manipulate them. And he speaks
a good
in
actor is able to do that.
Yeah. But it's only when he is alone. It is not when he is around other characters. When he's around other characters, he'll put on a smile, but the smile is just so fake that you're just creeped out while he's talking in this faux happy tone.
And that's what good acting is.
Yeah, it's so unsettling. Like, it's so unsettling. But the problem with this is their faces are kind of blank, which is an issue. They aren't very animated.
No, they're not. It's like they. Oh, good Lord! I just realized it. Not every single one. Sonic is the only one that didn't. But every single movie and TV show like that that I've seen recently, all the actors have open mouths and they're panting when they aren't speaking. And it's, why are you tired? You're not doing anything.
Like when Rey is about to get hit by Kylo Ren, and then she does the super 3D flip.
Yeah. Yes. And not just that, but the scenes from Solo that I have seen with fake Han, because that's not Han. That's not Han. When fake Han is standing there with his mouth slightly open and panting, and it's really, really obvious that he doesn't have the charisma to play the character.
Mm-hmm.
There is a natural charisma around Harrison Ford that just makes Han.
Mm-hmm. Or like Mark Hamill.
Yeah,
Mark
like
Hamill.
Mark Hamill. Yeah, Mark Hamill might be a B-list actor, but he's not bad. He can.
Mm-hmm.
He carried every single scene in Star Wars that was only him.
Mm-hmm.
But with all the scenes with the new characters, it was yeah, the open mouth pant is really popular. It's like every character is a pre-panic attack for some reason. Yes, that's exactly what it looks like. It looks like they're about to panic. It looks like they are not in control, and it just... Why?
Like,
because these people are incompetent, and I think that in the case of Star Wars, I don't know how good Daisy Ridley is as an actress, but I would say that Emilia Clarke and Kit Harington are actually really good actors that were given crap material. And
yeah, it's like,
and
all of them could be the best actors in existence, but there's only so much you can do if you're given a pile of crap.
Yeah, they were very unhappy with how it ended. Like, Emilia Clarke wandered around London in a daze for 2 hours after she read the script.
I'm not surprised.
And Kit Harington actually checked himself into rehab because he was having like compulsive drinking problems because of the stress on him. and then just before, I think there was a reunion either just barely before or barely after season 8, and David Bennioff made a joke of, "Oh, looks like Kit's opened up the booze already," when he himself is a compulsive drinker and has showed up to conventions like Comic-Con openly drunk.
How is he not arrested for public drunkenness?
I don't know. Yeah, it never ends with this man. And there's still more. There's more stuff. Yep.
And the Emmy Awards have become a joke, particularly since they lowered the voting standards in 2015. And a man who has boasted openly that he never read a screenwriting manual and believes these things is now winning Best Screenplay awards. So it's not just screenwriting or just cinematography or filming action scenes with horses. These aren't isolated incidents. They are a clear pattern of behavior.
Mm-hmm.
It's his approach to life in general. Any skill set needed to produce a TV show or a movie for that matter, he's a spoiled brat and a narcissist who feels he's automatically great. So how dare you judge him by saying he needs to read a manual? Okay, serious question. I want you to address this in the comments if you can. What kind of research do you think he's going to do writing the next Star Wars films? If he says in an interview,
Oh, that's when
I'm
this was
researching it,
made.
what does that even mean?
Yeah.
That if I was researching writing a Star Wars thing, like the way the Lucasfilm Story Group headed by Pablo Hidalgo will research things, they'll look up a lot of stuff of what have we already said in canon. Here's stuff we did in the Legends. They might even ask Lucas a question or two about, well, is this a thing the Force can do? And your philosophy of that. Research on the mythos or research on what are the practical effects for doing that kind of miniature work. Because there is an entire cottage industry of this is how the Star Wars trilogy was filmed, just in terms of industrial light and magic. At what research is he actually doing? And if you ask, it'll be he marathoned some DVDs of the movies, and you'll go, oh,
Yeah, that's
by marathon
exactly
you
what
mean
he's gonna
marathoning
do.
and listening to the director
Or, well,
commentary?
what he's
No,
planning to do.
he just like
Yep. He was
He
kicked
was,
real quick.
yeah, there was no way he was going to watch any of the commentary on this stuff. And actually, my favorite thing to do with the DVDs is to turn on the commentary and then watch the movie with the commentary because it is absolutely hilarious. And it also, not only is it hilarious, but it gives me a glimpse into, what's going through his head while this stuff is happening. And
Yeah.
Lucas makes comments on, on something like people didn't like Hayden's acting, but Hayden nailed it because Anakin was supposed to be wooden.
Yeah. He was.
So,
Which is interesting.
Yeah, and after I heard that, him say that in one of the commentaries, I watched them again and I went, yeah, he's actually really good because he's nailing being a board of wood.
Mm-hmm. And it's partially because George Lucas, he is a self-admitted he doesn't really like plots and characters. He prefers visual storytelling. That's what he loves about visual medium. That's what he loves about cinema.
Yeah.
In at least 2 interviews. And he prefers a 30s style of acting where the actors are conveying a lot more through their posture, their facial expressions than just the dialogue. That's what he loves.
Then if Benioff really wanted to get Game of Thrones right, he should have gone to George Lucas for help.
Probably.
Because George Lucas admitted that he prefers stuff like that too. But at least with George Lucas, he knew when dialogue was crucial to get ideas across.
Mm-hmm. Yep. Yeah, this guy is insane.
Like the way you watch them on TV or something. That's his approach to everything. Well, I watched it cold with no instructions. What? I'm capable of doing that. Instruction manuals make me feel stupid, but I'm perfect, therefore I don't need them. This is a man who just signed a $300 million development deal with Netflix.
That's way too much money.
For television for over 5 years.
No. Did he get kicked off that too? Please tell me he got kicked off that too. Please.
Oh no, he's still on that.
Oh no! Oh no! He's gonna lose so much money for Netflix. Oh no!
They've already sunk over $250 million into this jackass.
Netflix is now going to need like a clause in all their contracts that says we can terminate you if you suck hard enough.
Yes, and with what Benioff has said, and with him winning awards for his screenplays, even though he can't write a screenplay for anything, this makes me think I've never written one before. I bet I can do it better, even though I also have absolutely no experience.
Yeah.
And I bet I would be right. Because I would actually go find a manual and I'd get a sample script to read, and I'd read both at the same time.
Yeah. After this, we'll as a palate cleanser, first we'll hear the dramatic reading of David Benioff's book, and then we'll have the real king of TV, Seth Rogen, roast this pious idiot.
Yes, let's do it.
Saying it as an insult when I say he's not a screenwriter. He's not really a screenwriter in any meaningful sense of the word. That he's made things which he calls scripts. If you've seen the season 8 finale script, well, yeah, he calls that a script. That doesn't make it what a script should be.
So if you look at the bottom, let me make it so that the TV thing vanishes. Look at the bottom. Her Satanic Majesty's request, as like it's describing the scene.
Yeah. That's not a script. A script is character walks in from the left, character dialogue, another character comes in, dialogue with the first character, and then exits stage right.
Maybe some scene instructions on what to do.
And yeah, scene instructions on what to do. But that's basically what a script is. That's not a script. That is an excerpt from a novel. And
not even a good, well-written novel.
Yeah,
it's a weird novel with like weird in-jokes that are like contemporary obscure contemporary references.
What he might as well have done is he might as well have just copied George R. R. Martin's books and just used the book instead of writing the script himself, because
that's likely a lot of what he did for the first few seasons. They split the season 2 had a lot of changes in it. Season 3 had a number of was pretty much the same, but they split the third book into 2 seasons, with a few little changes in season 4, mostly to kind of fill time so that things could work out, so that it wasn't abrupt. And then they crammed 2 books into 1 season in season 5.
No, that's not what you should do. That's not even what anime does.
Yeah, anime stretches it out, and like even like George R. R. Martin himself was like they were asking, why does it, like, there's an interview where he's like, where people were like, why does it have to end? Why does it have to end? And I was like, George is like, I don't know. We could have gotten like 12, 13 seasons out of it, but I guess David and Dan, they just wanted a life.
Well, I'm reading the light novels for High School DxD, and to me, it looks more like there's 1 volume of the series per 1 season of the anime, and that works.
Mm-hmm.
So having 1 book, and these novels are no doubt much, much longer than
they're huge.
Any light novel. But light novels work with seasons that are 12 episodes or so, because there's not very much material there. So you can put filler in where it where it fits, because sometimes, like with DxD, High School DxD, which goes rather light on what's going on in descriptions, they can put filler and it'll fit and it'll work. But with something like A Song of Ice and Fire, no, you have way too much material to be putting filler in there.
Yeah.
Way too much.
Mhm.
And if you don't even have a season that's as long as an anime season, then you had better use all the material you have and just
Yeah.
skip putting filler in it. Especially
Yeah.
when the books are at least 3 times as long.
hmm And they failed to plan ahead on certain things. Like originally, like it's not Sansa who is taken to the Boltons in the books. It's her friend Jane Poole, who was never introduced in the show, and just kind of vanishes after the first episode. Whereas she actually has a lot of significance to the plot in book 5. She's put back into the story in season 3, in book 3, for a few minutes, for a few sentences of page time as a setup. And then in book 5, she's the catalyst for some really like actual moving and shaking in the North, because they think that she's Ned Stark's daughter, the former Liege Lord of the North, who was a very well respected man, and they're like, how dare you do this to his daughter?
Yeah.
Yeah. They're really dumb. Like, they had the outline. They had the outline in front of them, and they could have just adapted the books like verbatim, but they didn't. It's
There's
ridiculous.
so much material, they probably could have cut stuff out, and they'd still have enough material for more than 8 seasons.
Mm-hmm.
But
George the author, who has worked in television, like he worked on the show Beauty and the Beast for a while, as well as doing other screenplays. He said we could have gotten like 13 seasons out of it, but they wanted a life.
now I'm starting to wonder what kind of show Game of Thrones would have been if we'd gotten someone like the TV version of Spielberg.
Like Vince
Instead of-
Gilligan.
Yeah,
Vince
instead
Gilligan,
of
I think.
instead of this narcissistic idiot.
Yeah. Since like Vince Gilligan has gotten pretty much universal acclaim for his shows. Like Breaking Bad is held up as like a landmark in TV history. Same with the guys who wrote The Wire. Same with Better Call Saul, which was also Vince Gilligan. It just seems as though everything Vince Gilligan touches turns to gold in terms of like both critical acclaim and audience acclaim.
Yeah.
But yeah, we got this guy. Yeah.
It's the things he passes off as scripts. Prove me wrong. If he's won so many awards for best screenplay, let's play along with this. Ask him, how did you learn screenwriting? Instead of yet another red carpet question of, was it a fun experience being on Game of Thrones? Why, yes, shock. Ask him meaningful, non-shallow questions about the art of screenwriting. Just, hey, how did you learn screenwriting? Or more specifics like, what were the names of specific instruction manuals on screenwriting that you personally used or relied on? Because these clips I showed here, these are things he'll openly admit to, that he is proud that he didn't read an instruction manual.
Yeah, you'd get silence for
So
those
check
questions.
out the video report I did on his script before season 8. I'm linking to this. People following my channel weren't surprised. It's exactly like what season 7 did. I go over that in a lot more detail. These are the same things he was doing in the pilot. Notice how it's these paragraphs of describing characters' mental states in the script notes, which you're not supposed to do that. It's a basic mistake. And the same mistakes were made in the failed pilot in season 8, which pretty much reinforces the idea that he never learned. That if you're going to argue, well, maybe in the intervening 15 years between when he was making this commentary and when he was making Game of Thrones, maybe he actually sat down, changed his mind, and read a screenwriting manual. Well, his work doesn't evidence that. And not just opinion of, oh, bad, like specific structural problems, like you're putting scene descriptions have characters' emotions in them and things you shouldn't be putting in there. That the season 7 and 8 scripts looked like the failed pilot episode script. Nothing changed. He doesn't like learning. It's how dare you tell me that.
Mm-hmm.
And the surreal thing I'm going to close out on was the point in the 25th hour commentary when Benioff even openly admits that he kind of relies on actors giving great nonverbal emoting because he needs it to cover for his own weak writing.
Mm-hmm.
That he's almost had this moment of lucidity where he realizes, I'm talking out of my ass. I'm leaning on
that graph should be
people
going
emoting
the
all the time
opposite
because I never read the
direction.
instruction
It's
manual. I'm not good at
inverse.
this.
Dear Lord.
Yep.
It's going down instead of going up.
Yep.
When it bottoms out in season 8, is that basically when Arya kills the Night King?
Yep, pretty much. That whole episode is pretty much silent. Like as opposed to like there's like only a few lines here and there in that show, in that particular episode. And then I know for a fact the finale has almost an hour of quiet time.
Yeah, if you do that, your audience is gonna get bored.
Yeah.
And lost.
They're gonna get really
know what's
bored.
going on.
Yeah.
And basically, so part of the problem was they were focused so much on the moment where Jon kills Dany that they kind of forgot about any political fallout and just kind of threw something hastily together.
I
by
hate
their own
writing
initiative.
politics, but even I know that I would have had to do. But if I'd have had something like that in one of my books, that I was going to need to come up with some kind of consequence for killing the Queen of the Dragons.
Yep. And they just threw it hastily together. Like, they admit this in their behind the scenes episode.
Which I can't wait to sink my teeth into.
Yep. Thankfully, Dragon Demands took the 30-minute video and pared it down to their quotes. And it's kind of like, I am not surprised that HBO took this off, considering that the like to dislike ratio is 22K likes to 47K dislikes on the inside the episode for episode 5.
Wow, that ratio isn't as bad as some of the ratios I've seen for now, but that's still bad.
I might be wrong. Let me check, actually.
Don't be surprised if the ratio has disappeared.
HBO isn't like that bad, actually.
Was Mueller still planning to do his rage on the final episode? Anybody know?
He is.
Oh, I hope so. I actually want to watch his videos on Game of Thrones now. I do.
I was incorrect. The ratio is 45K likes to 94K dislikes.
That's more in line. That's more in line with what I've seen. Wow.
Oh, the comments are hilarious. Dream Schroeder 1 year ago. Scared to upload the inside the episode, are we?
Yes.
Where's the inside the episode for the finale, you cowards?
Oh dear Lord. I bet it's somewhere.
No inside the episode for episode 6? Of course not. They've run for the hills.
Oh, sure. I'll get the inside the episode for episode 6. And then you hear driving, airplane, rocket shuttle.
Oh, here's the best part. They secretly put it out.
They did?
Yes. That it's basically the final documentary. So in the documentary for the finale, that is basically the inside the episodes. It's the same camera shot. They're dressed the same in their wrinkled shirts.
Ooh.
They just hid that footage inside of the documentary because they thought, oh, it's a 30-minute documentary about the finale where the actors are kind of talking about their experience.
Yeah, no.
However,
I might have to watch that. I might have to watch that and cover it on my channel, actually.
So
I might have to do that myself. That sounds...
The best part is actually Dragon Demands has a supercut of all of their stuff and kind of back-to-back stuff of when they contradict themselves within their same video and when they blatantly get stuff wrong, like timescale wise. Either that is likely a lie because they're like, we published the book around the time season 3 was coming out. He's like that the last book came out 2 years. What, 2 years before that point, you idiot.
Yes.
Yeah. So I'll just kind of I guess once we finish this, I'll just...
No, seriously, here's the clip.
Yeah.
I knew Jake was about to make his eyes. Big move. Certain things I think work better in books, and certain things work better in movies, and it's one thing that works so well here that I don't think I could have pulled off just narrating with this face.
This guy has a
Later
fetish.
comes out of the bathroom.
Yes,
Yeah,
it's
he
weird.
does.
Like him, it's kind of, out of a Munch painting or something. And Brian Cox is only in like 2 scenes in the movie, and in many ways, I think is the heart of the movie. I think one of the great actors of our time, and just someone's able to convey so much emotion without even speaking.
Yeah, you can. You can do that without speaking, but you still need to speak.
Mm-hmm.
And
Yep.
the loyalty of Monty's father, who, of course, is not going to let his son go up on his own. And he wants to do everything he can up until the last possible moment, up until the gates close behind him. He wants to be there for him.
So here's the interesting part. Bennioff has actually said in a quote, admittedly there's very little context, but I think that this quote requires no context. Themes are for 8th grade book reports. Would you say that quote requires context?
Yes. Yes.
Oh,
yes.
That's where terrible writing advice got that line from.
So
it makes so much sense now.
so basically, he said, there are a lot of people who are defenders and say that quote, themes are for 8th grade book reports, is taken out of context. I'm like, it pretty much speaks for itself. He was asked about themes and characters, and he just said themes are for 8th grade book reports.
I know that when I was still in college, and I was reading a book, my book reports were, what are the themes of the book? It's like, You
My
don't
word.
think you need that for stuff that above the 8th grade? Are you... For Pete's sake.
And even like he says, and then like he's talking about themes in this commentary.
Yes, I would call him a hypocrite.
Yeah, yeah, it's totally insane that he like just lets him. He just he makes.
There we go.
He ultimately.
I mean, one thing it's screenwriting. It's when you're lucky enough to be blessed with actors of this magnitude. I mean, Brian Cox can embody in his walk a page of prose.
No, he can't. You can't do that. No. No.
You know, just
No,
like
no,
how
no, 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 that's not how it works. That's not how it works. You cannot embody a page of prose with just walking. You can't do that. You can
And look,
maybe...
and look at the bottom. If you have, and
Oh,
if
dear.
you do have that, if you have the luck to work with actors like that, it sort of covers up your mistakes as a screenwriter and lets you get away with much less.
I think he meant to say much more.
More.
Yeah.
Yes, much more. But, you know, you don't have to have the actors make up for your inefficiencies if you are a good enough writer.
Well, I think what he's saying is you can get away with writing less stuff.
Well, yes, perhaps. But at the same time, it's... You can embody in his walk a page of prose. I don't think I know any actor who can do that. No, what he's doing right now is he's pandering to Cox. That's what he's doing.
Mm-hmm. Yep.
You can tell by the way he does his walk, he's a woman's man. No time to...
And just the expression on his face. Do you notice how face is underlined?
Yeah, because he just keeps going on about it, and like his proteges, Cogman goes on about it as well.
He's got a face fetish or something. I don't get it.
He's called the face stealer.
I mean, it's not even necessary at this point. He had a sure thing. He didn't need to pander to the actors. They were going to show up regardless.
I
Make
feel
it
like
good.
he's trying to create a scenario where no one can criticize his writing without criticizing the actors, which he thinks people will be less likely to do. No.
I do know that one interesting thing about the backlash is nobody went after the actors.
Yeah, exactly. Nobody went after the actors. They all went after him. And that just proves his thoughts on being able to keep himself from being criticized without having the actors criticized is wrong. Because, you know, Mark Hamill may be a B-list actor, but we weren't complaining about Mark Hamill. We were complaining about how Luke was written. Those are two very different things, and I don't think the people in Hollywood understand that anymore.
Yeah, Emilia Clarke's charity, Same You, which is, she actually had a brain aneurysm in season 2, and while she was filming season 2, and she was being put through the ringer and had some really terrible things happen to her physically. Like, she nearly died. And so, like, she created a charity, and after season 8, I think Reddit Free Folk just said, let's just donate to Emilia Clarke's charity. And she made I think like either a Twitter or an Instagram post where she was profusely thanking them for doing that for her.
Yeah.
And
Because
and then when Kit Harington, like, he couldn't, for whatever reason, the showrunner said, you can't take your sword, the sword that you've had for 8 seasons, the entirety of the show's run. And there was even a petition online that said, give Kit Harington his friggin' sword.
yeah. Oh. Ooh.
Yep.
Yeah. I realize it didn't work, but it does feel like his intention when he put so much emphasis on what actors can supposedly do, no matter the quality of the script. Yeah, but there's a point at which where the only way to save the script is for the best actor in the world to throw out all seriousness and go full ham and cheese on it.
Mm-hmm. Yep.
That's one of the reasons why Monty Grail and
Monty Python and Holy Grail.
yeah, that's one of the reasons why it's so good, because they're just hamming it up.
Mm-hmm. Yep. Alrighty. We got 3 minutes left.
The whole season. I mean, just the performances here. No movement. Lean on her knees and Jonathan sitting. But just so compelling watching both these faces.
Oh God, no.
This is a great silent moment coming up.
No.
No dialogue, just Lena's face.
No. You're losing your audience by doing this. You're losing
here's
your
a great
audience by doing this. Because you know what? If it's just silent, if there's not even music, I am going to turn my attention either to something I'm reading or something that I'm writing. Because I can be much more productive than just staring at a screen that's showing nothing. Which is basically what him just focusing on the faces with no dialogue is. That's nothing.
Oh, and we get like his protege, which kind of says Brian Cogman is pretty much saying similar things to him. Because Bennioff is his mentor, even though Bennioff has never like done screenwriting. It's so weird how much Cogman just without question just parrots without doing his own research. It's so frustrating.
Yes,
Write
yes,
an
it
entire
is.
scene where he doesn't speak, and I know I can write an entire scene where he doesn't speak and script the subtext of what's going on, and he will convey all of that behind the eyes or with a look. And that's an incredible.
No, you can't do that without dialogue.
I can write an entire scene where he doesn't speak.
I mean, you can have scenes where there's no speaking, but those scenes had better be really quick scenes. Those scenes had better be short scenes, and they had better have music so that we have something to keep our attention.
Mm-hmm.
That's how I feel. But if it's just silence and looking at faces, I'm gonna find something else to do.
Mm-hmm.
It's like, and not knowing what's going on here. If I just had to sit and watch everybody just silently emote, I might think that is there telepathy in this world?
Yeah, that would be a good question. But then if there was telepathy, there would be voiceovers so that we could listen to conversations in telepathy.
Mm-hmm. Pretty much, yeah.
Yeah, but it's obvious that that's not what's going on because there's just dead silence.
And just still faces. It just says that weird line. This is one of my favorite silent moments. No dialogue, just Lena's face. And it's just like, that's creepy. And especially since the actress is sitting next to them.
Yeah.
As they're making that comment.
It's one thing to have a silent scene where the actor is trying to convey something with expressions, but in order for that to work, the actress or actor's expression actually has to change.
As well as they have to have like camel work moves where you kind of see what the person is focusing on and see what is what the
Yeah,
emotion is.
you can't just focus on the face. Instead of focusing on the face, focus on the entire room or something.
Mm-hmm.
Because if a lot of people are looking at it in a specific direction or at a specific object on the set, then you can see what has their attention, and your attention is not likely to wander. Or blocking people don't have to be talking, but they do need to be doing something.
Yep, pretty much, yeah.
Yes.
And when you're writing, you have to be considering of your medium. You have to realize how you're conveying information. And the problem is, he's not conveying information.
Yeah, that's the problem.
Mm-hmm.
With things like light novels, you're in a specific character's head. So you can have all of their thoughts and mentality laid out for you on the page. But the moment that you turn that into a TV show, you have to figure out how to get all of the stuff that's in their head onto the screen somehow. And that means voiceovers, more dialogue than there actually was in the books, and more interactions or just voiceovers where they're just thinking things.
Yeah, or they have a narration.
Yeah.
Or one example that they actually did was they cut out pretty much all of the flashback scenes from the books.
And this is precisely the reason why I considered adopting Literature Devil's practice of writing things that you intend to, in the future, have a visual medium, say a comic book, writing it in prose initially.
Yeah.
Mm-hmm.
Because now you have all the information that you need other than things that you choose to omit because it wouldn't tell the story well in the prose format. And you take those notes separately on the side. That way there's no compromise. You don't compromise the integrity of the information.
Mm-hmm.
So you write it in the style of prose, and then stuff that you choose to omit because it's in the prose format, you take notes separately.
Yeah.
Mm-hmm.
And then you have all the information that you need to, one, tell a captivating story because you literally just did it by writing it in prose. And secondarily, you have all the notes for reference in terms of stuff that wasn't included in the prose variation of the story. For example, what the character looks like.
Yeah.
Mm-hmm.
And then you can communicate that information to the artist or the actor or the costume designer or what have you, whatever medium you're going to be transferring to. Then you want to have that information secondhand. But if you only have the notes, then there's a lot of stuff you're going to miss as well.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah.
In fact,
exactly.
I wouldn't be surprised if when Devil initially began writing Dr. Alpha, the universe anyway,
Yeah.
in the Oculus Limited or whatever it's called, that whole universe, I wouldn't be surprised if somewhere in this house is just a giant thing of notes of stuff that was cut out of the prose version.
Yeah, I would not be surprised either. It's like if you're trying to create, let's say, a magic system for something. And you have to know everything that the magic can and can't do. And then after you have all of those notes, then you have to decide, okay, what do the characters know? How do they learn what they know? And how do they figure out what the limitations are?
Yeah.
And where and when do they figure those things out so that you can lay it out in whatever format story that you're creating?
Yeah. If I can use like an example from my book, basically in the Perion Chronicles Lost Legion, I don't necessarily have a mentor-student relationship at all in terms of the magic. What I do have instead to allow the audience to learn is basically have a competent character understand and utilize it in a practical fashion. There is experimentation with new stuff, but there's no like expository stuff other than there's a chunk of like the beginning of a chapter that's an in-world instruction manual on magic and how it works and the express limitations of what it can do.
And that's kind of like that little excerpt you have at the beginning of each chapter of your story, right?
Yep. And so that's what I was able to get away with. So I basically tell the audience, okay, this is how the magic works. I don't need to take away time out of the story to tell you, and just have characters exposit to each other.
Mhm.
I just have an in-world history book explain, okay, this is how the magic works. Now you know, we can move on.
Yeah, but that's my point. You had to figure out that that's what you wanted to do, and I bet you have a whole lot of notes somewhere that say that.
Actually, no. I keep most of my stuff in my head.
I wish I could do that.
If you're more like me, you don't really have all your notes in one place. I wish I had that kind of wherewithal. I'll just open up a Word document, save it on my desktop, and God knows if I could find them all, but they're all over the place.
I try to have my Google Docs folder meticulously organized in terms of, okay, here's my new stuff, here's my stuff that I'm working on, here are the specific scenes for this book and this book that I'm going to be putting in later. But I decided to write early so that I had them clear in my head.
This is actually one of the biggest reasons why I got a new computer, was because there was so much old stuff on there that I would rather not get rid of in terms of rushing. I'd much rather get to it when I get to it. So I'm just kind of keeping my old laptop as a memory bank for all the things I don't need anymore. Because that's what it is. It's a tool. And then having the new computer, it's much less overwhelming to take up a new hobby, in this case, writing in a way that's efficient and having it be organized. That way it doesn't get lost in the shuffle and then I become all disoriented because there's so much stuff.
So
I see all stuff in front of me that's disorganized. I don't want that.
Yeah, totally. Like I have a several Pinterest boards dedicated to the cast of my book, like okay, this is what I picture this person looking like, so I don't get things mixed up. And I'll also use like armor references, sword references.
Mainly illustrative stuff. Illustrative references.
Yes. Like actors, actresses, musicians, swords, so that I can kind of like, okay, this is my reference. This is what I'm going to describe.
That's what I've started doing. Let's see. I don't put these profiles for characters anywhere, but it's good to have pictures so that I can have references. So I'll have a picture of someone with a set of armor that I like, that I'm going to use for, like,
a visual model.
Yeah, like a visual model. And then I'll say, and then when I go to describe it, if I want it to be that but a different color, I'll describe it and then I'll put the color instead of just describing it as is.
Yep. Well, we just have a little bit left to go. Let's finish this thing up.
Yes, let's finish.
Going on, and he will convey all of that behind the eyes or with a look, and that's an incredible gift to a writer.
Littlefinger, because Littlefinger has been a fascinating character for me to watch throughout the series because he has had a hand in, I feel like, almost everything that's happened.
Yeah, and a lot of it, there's that great look. This is, again, like, I praise our actors, but like that's another thing where, you in those big crowd scenes, you shoot coverage of everybody. They take forever. Those scenes in the great hall where everyone's reacting to things, so you've got a camera on Aiden reacting to the whole scene. Aiden Gillen plays Littlefinger. And there's one little bit he did where he reads the thing about Daenerys arriving, and Aiden just goes, like, oh, okay. Daenerys Targaryen's alive with dragons. make a note of that. Like, it's that just watching him internalize that is delicious.
Again, one of those scenes I read and thought, wow.
Yeah.
That's not how that works.
Yeah, so if you notice, so that point where, so that intercut where he's like, goes from talking about like, I know I can script the subtext. That question about Littlefinger is a clear attempt by the interviewer to move it to writing. And he doesn't do it.
It's, well, if you want to convey a lot of information, you can't just focus on one person. If there's a crowd and you want a lot of information conveyed, you've got a whole crowd to convey a whole lot of information.
Yeah. And
so
like
focus on the crowd instead of a single person.
And the weirdest part of that is he just says, oh, like just that little head move that was unscripted and is just talked about that, as opposed to, I wrote that little bit of scene direction for him so that he conveyed this information. No, it's like the actor on his own did this. And he just talks about that unprompted, even after the guy's like, well, it feels like this, like this character, how did you, like keep this character consistent? Or like, he's always been fascinating. How did let's discuss this character. And he just discusses the actor doing a weird, like, improv thing.
I do not think he knows how to
convey
separate
information.
the actor from the character. The same way that J.K. Rowling cannot separate story from setting.
And well, this is a consistent problem throughout Game of Thrones writing crew. Like Bennioff just doesn't think, he just will scream, oh, look at Stephen Delane, same with Weiss. And as you can see there, Cogman just can't separate the actor from the performer. It's really weird. Even though he's an actor himself, this is very strange that he is saying this.
Well, there is always the chance that he's just parroting it so he doesn't get fired, but...
Yeah. Yeah. Well, even in like commentaries, he'll say some really dumb stuff. Like he says, like, well, you think about plot armor. The friggin' hobbits in Lord of the Rings had plot armor, so I regret nothing. Oh. I have the
Frodo had literal armor.
I have the quotes and the audio.
There is plot armor and literal armor do not have to be the same thing.
Also, like, plot armor, like, isn't necessarily a bad thing. It's just when it's something impossible that it's just like, oh gosh.
Like someone surviving getting their spine completely torn out, for example. Just to use something like that. You can't really survive that.
Yeah, but like or like getting stabbed in the gut and running up several flights of stairs.
No,
like it's nothing.
Yeah, you can't do that.
Yeah.
If you're stabbed in the gut, I'm sorry, you're falling to the floor and you're going to bleed out in several hours if someone doesn't
get medical help.
Yeah.
It's worse than that. You get stabbed in the wrong place, you get a collapsed lung, and you're dead before you hit the floor.
Yeah.
Yeah, or it goes through your heart.
Mm-hmm. Yep. Or when armor doesn't do anything and these whites stab through plate mail.
Yes.
Which happens twice in the same episode.
Oh.
They're not magic, are they?
No, they're not magic. They're just zombies with swords. And they're crude swords for the most part.
So why does anybody fear them?
Because there's hundreds of thousands of them, and then they have these White Walkers that have swords that shatter steel that's not Valyrian steel.
Okay, that's pretty important.
And they don't come into play in the whole of the battle. It's just the zombies.
No, if the battle were strategically planned properly, they wouldn't come into play because they'd all get shelled to hell before it mattered.
Yep, probably.
But they didn't do it properly.
You got these actors, these faces.
These actors, these faces.
And when you guys make it look so beautiful.
Just more evidence that they can't.
Most of all, these performances, these faces, the fireworks of these actors, two of our finest actors in the cast playing off each other.
And there's one little bit he did where he reads the thing about Daenerys arriving, and Aiden.
But built a world around.
I think that's pretty much it for that bit.
Yeah, that's not how it works. There's the same difference between the character and the actor playing them, and the knowledge that the people who have outside knowledge and the knowledge that the characters have.
Mm-hmm.
So, and that's the same difference, but it's obvious that Bennioff does not know that there is a difference.
Mm-hmm. He doesn't. So if you notice, I was not kidding. There is a video entitled David Bennioff Thinks Brown Women Are Hot.
Oh, for God's sake.
And we're not going to cover all of this today, but what we are going to do is we're going to take a look at his prose of specifically his book. I believe it's 25th Hour.
Good God, even I can write better than this. Then again, I've been writing for a long time.
Yeah. Let's see. Where is that bit? It's kind of hard to find parts of it. Let's see. Okay.
Blue.
On that, it didn't too long. Self-absorbed in that narcissism.
Did he word it that way?
How can he not get canceled? That's a good question, Blue. I wish I knew the answer to that.
I do too. I think let me see. Where's a little bit? Let's see. Where is that bit? It's somewhere in here. Come on. Where are you at? Yeah, there's so much bad things. Like, it's amazing that like even just like not even like it's like his content is so weird.
It is so cringe.
Yeah, let me see. Oh, I think I found it. Let's see.
Thinking for over 200 pages, this is like someone made Dennis Reynolds' An Erotic Life come alive. So this is the core dramatic reading I was building up. It sounds like something out of Dennis Reynolds. Tabachnik and Molly Minx held on to a metal pole as the train shuddered and plunged through the tunnel. He wore black woolen pants, a black cashmere turtleneck sweater, and a full-length black peacoat, because it's winter. Molly wore a powder blue catsuit that zipped up the back. Winter wasn't over yet, and this is what she wore. She had what seemed to be a permanent wedgie. All the men within sight had noticed this condition. An old man chewing a potato knish stared at her ass, glanced back at Tabachnik, and then resumed staring at her ass. The other men pretended not to stare at her ass, pretended to look up only at appropriate moments, as when the conductor announced something unintelligible, and then sneakily stared back at her ass. When Tabachnik caught them, they would quickly look away. But Tabachnik wanted people to stare at her ass. He wanted the whole world horny for Molly Minx. It's paid.
What is this?
Oh my
ass,
God,
man.
Lord, good Lord, that is cringy as hell. What? This actually
He got paid by the ass.
This actually got published. What? What?
Yep.
Oh my God.
This is a preview for what's to come. There's another little bit here that I think I'd like to share.
Oh dear.
To see what he really is beneath the mask is in the commentary for 25th Hour. Go out and get it. As it relates to this right now, there's a point where unprompted, let me stress this because it's a solo DVD commentary, no one else is in the room with him. There's a point where Bennioff goes on a long rant denying that Rosario Dawson's Puerto Rican girlfriend character is exotic. He goes, unprompted, just going, oh yes, this is her. Her name is Naturelle. But he gives her this exotic name. And she's Puerto Rican, Rosario Dawson, she's beautiful. And her whole character arc is, I'm wearing this beautiful dress for him because it's the last day before he goes to prison, that she's not really fleshed out as a person. And just unprompted, there's a point where he stops and goes, is she exotic? Well, I don't know. I wouldn't call her exotic. What? Who's calling her exotic? I'm not calling her exotic. And he trails off incoherently. And this is what TVTropes.com calls a suspiciously specific denial. That unprompted, as if this is a conversation.
Yeah, that's a suspiciously specific denial. Yeah.
So I am amazed that he has not suffered the wrath of cancel culture.
Yes, I am. I really,
and there's even better stuff.
am.
There's even better stuff coming.
With other people before this, he starts defending himself. Who said she's exotic? Is she exotic? I don't know. And it's, wait, what? So, in the context, lining these up in the context of, I just finished reading these bizarre short stories in which every main romantic lead is either Latina or ethnically ambiguous. That one that was Thai and he couldn't tell if she was Filipino. And then this rant about, is the Puerto Rican character exotic? Those two together, I noticed the trend.
Yes, I would. Yeah.
On top of that, if you're bringing this up, Bennioff writes the same author insert character into everything. Even when he experiments with making the lead character in one short story a woman, basically all he did was change the pronouns, that women don't talk like this.
Good Lord.
Please tell me
you have an excerpt. Please tell me there's an excerpt from that, because I can definitely tell you one way or the other if that's how we speak.
Well, he has this thing where this opulent pleasure seekers is how he describes the medieval Spain-inspired Dornish.
What? Pleasure seekers?
Yep.
And of course I believe you because it's Bennioff.
Yeah. Here's the next little bit of how this was
in the
displayed
Game of Thrones TV show. Yes. Since seasons 1 and 2.
So the
I know
entire
it's been a while, so I'm going to
TV
start
show
with the first
Right.
several examples. If you remember back to season 1, Armeka. She was one of the invented prostitute characters that isn't in the books. So right after Roz, we went, oh, there's this other new character in it, before we start getting a lot of new characters. So it isn't just copying the really fixating on this, because we were picking apart that first season. Many assumed from season 1 that she was meant to be Dornish. But then in the season 2 premiere, Roz explained in this speech, oh, she pretends she doesn't speak the common tongue so that people will think she's exotic, think she's Dornish. She really grew up just down the road in Flea Bottom.
Mm-hmm.
So we were outright told in season 2, and various foreigner she's is alluring. And you may remember her, she was the
America.
other no need to lie for them.
Armeka.
Neil Marshall
Armeka.
showing her off naked.
Oh my god.
And I'm not entirely sure on this. As we all know, director Neil Marshall, infamously not a regular on the show, no need to lie for them, said in an interview with Empire Magazine in 2012 that an executive producer, many assume it was Bennioff, but never proven, repeatedly urged him to add more full frontal nudity during filming, that right before the battle the men are going to the brothel to have one last hurrah before they might all die. And he said he felt it was unnecessary and distracting. But the producer told him, everyone else in the series represents the drama side. I represent the perv side of the audience. And I'm saying I want full frontal nudity in the scenes. And he described the meeting as pretty surreal. Specifically, what character did he demand to show full frontal?
I think I know.
She was the one that we were infamously, when they were demanding full frontal nudity for. This adds another layer to the I represent the perv side of the audience incident. Not only did they insist on adding full frontal nudity, Bennioff has a documented history of considering ambiguously brown women like Armeka to be exotic and mysterious. So the full thought was, I think ambiguously brown women are hot, exotic, and I demand to see this brown woman naked, to see her genitals, over the objections of the episode director.
Yeah, no. Putting nudity in for nudity's sake is like grim for grim's sake, which turns grim dark into grim derp.
Yep.
Grim derp.
Yeah.
What do you think people call worm? That's grim derp. And no, I have not read Worm.
I gotta save that for next time somebody talks about Primaris Marines.
Yeah. So
you're welcome.
Yeah.
Thank you.
So Seth Rogen, I'm going to be kind of skipping around to specifically Seth Rogen's comments throughout this, but here we have kind of just our palate cleanser to make us laugh.
Gratuitous is too weak a word, but it's as close as I can get.
Yeah, it is very bad. It is so bad.
Yeah, that's so nice. Well, you guys have finished filming already. Season 4 has been shot in Australia. And again, you know everything that's coming, but that trailer looks like absolute insanity. What else can you tease about shooting this season and literally bringing the apocalypse?
I don't know what we can say. Honestly, I kind of think the show his best, I think it's surprising and shocking elements are some of his stronger traits. I do just want to start by saying I know we're following the Game of Thrones panel, which is a fucking nightmare, just objectively. I also know that their showrunners didn't show up because they didn't want to answer questions about the show. So I just want to say that I am not one of the creators of Game of Thrones, but I am the creator of other TV shows. So feel free to ask me any Game of Thrones questions you guys have throughout the night. I'm not an expert. I didn't read the books, but I watched the show, so I can give you my insights and thoughts just as to how they pulled it off.
What series finale is going to be more satisfying, Preacher or Game of Thrones?
I think hopefully I won't be. I'm here at least, so I think that's a good sign.
Just the ruthlessness, no mercy. Just says like it's a friggin' nightmare.
Yes,
like
that was awesome.
There's more.
Ooh, yes, please.
I'm willing to show my face.
Oh, that's a good burn. I hope Bennioff has cream for that.
Well, the thing is, they didn't show up at Comic-Con. They chickened out at the last minute, like 2 days before Comic-Con. They chickened out.
Oh my god.
Yep.
Well, he still got burned, so he still needs the burn cream.
Yep.
The fact that we were able to do it and that Garth liked it and that the fans of the comic, comic book fans, take it from, I've dabbled in the comic book space before. Like, I know how unforgiving people can be. And the fact that, no one's assassinated me, means you've done a great job.
He came to the panel,
exactly.
He came to the panel.
I'm here, the fact that
I love how people keep saying that.
I'm very proud of the job we did on bringing the show to life. And what I would also like to say is I would imagine those guys regret making Bran the king. Because
he's the disabled kid, right?
Yep.
Doesn't have the best story. And that's...
Yeah. And he basically does nothing for most of the show.
Questions about the Game of Thrones for these guys. I don't know what we're doing here.
I'll hypothesize. I'll give you my take. I don't know for sure. I've met them a couple times. They're nice, but yeah.
Why didn't Arya wear a face again in the final
the
season?
top one.
Okay,
Yeah,
so much-
shape-shifting
yeah, she learned all that face shit. Where'd it go? What did you do with those faces?
We did an interview for EW when you're on set and you're like people are here. Over the years, and I think this is the reality.
The last season, and my surprise when we saw
the power of the internet.
This show has been so good, and it caught me by surprise when we saw the trailers that it's the last season, and my reaction was, why? What do we got to do to make it not be the last season?
Don't try. Don't do one of those things because it ends. It's over. It would put us in a weird position if you guys now made like a petition to save Preacher because it's over and we would have to do some other thing, which would be super. It would be hard for us.
But you will reshoot the last season, right?
Yeah,
you'll go back and you'll redo that. Okay,
Yeah, we're gonna crowdsource the reshooting of the final episode. Dragons around. Yeah. I bet they wish they kept more of the dragons around. I'm gonna say that.
Yep.
Yeah.
And
I probably would have tried reading the books and watching the show if there was less profanity in it.
Probably. Yeah.
Oh, go back. That. Oh my god, that's so funny. I was saying,
Do you think that they made a mistake by not not having Jaime Lannister kill Cersei?
I do, honestly, a little bit. It was disappointing. You don't want to follow these people for 3 years and see them for 6 years. They're trapped in rubble. Come on. Anticlimactic. Anyway.
Isn't this great?
Yes, this is so awesome.
Yeah, and you guys haven't even.
Good too.
Yep. And we'll be covering the full David Bennioff Thinks Brown Women Are Hot next week.
Count me in.
Oh, that was just a teaser.
Yeah, I'm very much looking forward to it.
Yes.
What I showed you, what I showed you is probably like, I don't know, like 3 minutes or so out of an hour and 7-minute documentary.
Oh boy.
Yeah, I kid you not. This is the thing that they were doing. They like it's so creepy, and it extends to other characters as well.
Some people might not think brown people are hot. Did he never think of that?
He has a fetish, and he indulges it both in his writing and in the show.
Yes, which means he didn't think about it.
Yep.
Jesus.
Let's finish this.
Yes.
I like that was his question though.
I know that actually was my question. Yeah. Well, I have one more question before we go to fan questions.
Okay.
Yeah, and the thing with the Game of Thrones panel is they deliberately ran overtime to make it so that fan questions wouldn't be answered.
And so they'd have to ask the next panel. Maybe.
Yeah, and then
if they allowed it.
And
then he allowed it, which is great. This is basically the Game of Thrones Q&A portion.
well, the Game of Thrones potshot portion.
Yes.
I am so glad that you people who have never seen the show are reacting with just as much horror as I did.
Yeah, I may not know any of the proper nouns, but
yeah.
You know what? I may just go back and watch it just to rip it apart so that I have material for my channel.
Yeah, you know what? If you do it like Game of Thrones, like you get good views from Game of Thrones.
In that case, it'll probably be torture because I'll be going, why? You do not need this much vulgar language, but it'll be worth it.
Yeah.
Swearing in fiction is an art form. You have to know when to do it, how to do it. You may even have to make up your own swear words because they may not have a hell.
Yeah.
Yeah, but exactly. Unless they are used sparingly, cursing loses its impact really, really quickly.
It's like it's very sensitive to culture. It's like motherfucker. You know where that comes from? It comes from Oedipus. It's a very disgusting thing in our culture to literally fuck one's mother. Therefore, it is considered one of the more vulgar terms in our language.
Yes, exactly. And yet there are people nowadays who use the word willy-nilly and have no idea just how much they're devaluing that disgusting word.
Yeah. We only got a little bit left. We're almost done.
I do just want to start by saying I know we're following the Game of Thrones panel, which is a fucking nightmare, just objectively. I also know that their showrunners didn't show up because they didn't want to answer questions about the show. So I just want to say that...
Again, he needs burn cream for that. palate cleanser. That was
Yep.
perfect.
I knew I couldn't end on the David Bennioff thinks brown women are hot thing. I just wanted to give the audience a taster of the weird creepiness that they are going to experience on Tuesday. But I know that I don't really have anything planned in terms of streams on Saturday and Sunday. What I'm going to be doing is I'm going to be reading a couple of manuscripts I got sent over the weekend. Then I'm going to be doing a stream with Dr. Crow, and then I'm going to be doing a stream with all of you covering David Bennioff thinks brown women are hot, and we might have to split it into two parts if we're like getting like lots of like content out of it. But it seems as though the nice thing about this show is like we're thoroughly focused on the topic at hand, even if like the topic at hand is exhaustive. Like there's so much to cover.
Yeah. And there are so many comparisons to make too that we kind of have to be careful with that.
Yeah. Well, I have to thank chat so much for coming over and watching. We actually had our highest numbers this week with 12 people watching the stream, and I'm really, really happy about that.
We must be doing something right then.
Yeah, we're slowly increasing in viewership. I have to thank my wonderful guests, Neph Champion, Agent Yokai Zero, and Drake the Duelist. Thank you guys so much for being willing to guest on the show, and you guys make this thing excellent. I'm so happy to have you guys.
Well, thank you for having us.
Yep. Well, thank you all, chat. It has been lovely having you. I will see you again Monday. Thank you very much. Bye.
See you guys later.
Bye.